Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Love Bomb Chat. And I am welcoming back the first return guest, which is Jimmy Nuts of the, I want to say like almost formerly Fantasy Nuttwork, because you were talking about this with your chat with Gavin last night, in which the name doesn't necessarily fit the channel anymore, but
Yeah.
it's just there. So it's good.
It's what people know. I did a measurement. Still up to 70% of my reading is fantasy. So
Okay.
I'm so overwhelmingly fantasy. It's
That's a
just that
good percentage.
I get lumped into the fantasy niche, and sometimes I'm like, it would be nice if I got invites from other sectors of
Right?
booktube too, because like I love lit fic. I read hot girl
Yeah.
fiction. I'm gonna read some romantasy. I'm trying to branch out and do more.
I,
Just
We're
more
going to talk
stories.
about that. We're going to talk about your romantasy
Oh,
journey because I'm very excited.
you're invested. Okay, all
I
right.
am highly invested. Not only because obviously just for my own personal benefit, I want everyone to start reading romantasy. There you go. He's just overwhelming in general.
Gavin
But
would know. I overwhelmed him last night with my bad taste Princess Diana joke.
I was there for it. I saw it and I lived through it, and
She didn't.
It was an experience. It was an experience. And you know what? Giving the people what they want. That's about it. So hi, Joanna. Yes, mine is a romantasy, but it is more fantasy than romance.
Romantasy. And a nice little cover reveal this week. Looks beautiful. Congratulations.
Yes, thank you.
Very
Thank
exciting.
you. It was a lot. It was a lot of coordinating things, and very exciting and very overwhelming that it feels real now. Because I've been looking at it in my house for the last couple months, and every time I walk by it, I'm like, cool, that's a nice cover. And I've completely dissociated that it's mine, to the point where my 2.5-year-old goes, Mama's book. And I'm like, it might be, and that's kind of been it for the last little while.
Yeah.
So it feels a bit more real now, which
it certainly is real. It's gonna happen. And then
6 months.
I mean, are you nervous at all? Are you nervous for like the reception? Are you nervous people won't like it?
I am. But I also have been going into this knowing that this is not a book for everybody, because no book is for everybody. And I am already putting those mental blocks in place that I won't check Goodreads and I won't check things just because I will take certain days to look at things, because I do think that as an author, looking at reviews can be helpful in terms of improving your craft and all of that type of stuff. But for my mental well-being and the obsessive person that I am, I know I will sit there and like refresh and be like, how many people hate this book? How many people like this book? And that will not be
I can
good.
block the page on your router if you want.
That might be helpful.
Yeah. You just won't be able to go there.
That might be helpful, honestly. But Josh has already agreed to intercede for me at a certain point after the book has come out, that he will go on and check, and we will go through certain things, and I'll have like a set day to be emotionally vulnerable and upset.
You know what you should do?
What should I do?
You should start your next project before the day before the book releases, so that you're like, well, even if they didn't like this, I got this whole other thing and I can correct all these mistakes, or what, you know what I mean? Like, have somewhere to put that energy in, and then it might end up motivating you.
I am already working on book 2. So book 2 has about 40,000 words written in it. And then I started a completely different project that has about 20,000 words in it. So yeah, I've been busy, but that's kind of part of it too. I've talked to a few other authors that said they wrote their books back to back and they published them very quickly. And they almost regret that now, in the sense that they didn't take that time to go through what people were saying about the book to try to enhance the series for their readership. And I was like, okay, that's something to keep in mind.
See, that's tough too, though, because like you probably have an idea where you want to go. At least I would imagine. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're discovering. But like
I am mostly discovery, but I have a general idea. It's a combo.
I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, though, right? Because like for me, I've always considered reviews. Like I would almost find it arrogant if I said my review is constructive feedback for this author.
Right?
It's for the reader. It's not for the author. So like, how much of do you let in the door? And that's the weird thing. So like Stephen King talks about writing with the door closed. He writes with the door closed, like I think 2 drafts, and then he opens the door and thinks about what people might want or how people might perceive his novels. And I think that's something that came like later on. But you know, with a trilogy or a series, whatever, you're almost forced to open the door permanently for the sequels. So like how much of that you take for feedback, how much of it do you want to like maintain your original vision? It's tough. It's really, really tough. I mean,
it is. And it's interesting just because obviously Romantasy as a genre right now is exceedingly popular. I would say it is, it's really the best selling fantasy genre right now. And most authors are writing to market, but what the market wants is kind of interesting. Just looking at it, that some people really want more open door spice. Some people would like more romantasy without that. They would like the semblance of romance without it kind of being front and center. You know, some people want that kind of epic feel. But
how much spice are we talking for you? Like, what can I expect when I crack these pages? Am I gonna look at you different?
I would say in terms of book 1, we're looking at like 1 pepper. If we're giving it a pepper scale.
Okay. Like you would let your mom read it?
I mean, I'd probably give her a chapter warning, but other than that, yeah. I have told family members, I'm like, you are reading this at your own choice. So I will not hear anything about it. But it's not the worst thing, but it's not non-existent completely.
Let me ask you this. So I'm interviewing you now, apparently.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
Here's my question for you.
Yeah.
Did writing spice come naturally to you?
No, it did not.
Did you feel like you had to work at it?
I did. I very, very much did. And what I did, I had a day specifically where I knew it was going to be my smut day. And I was like, this is it. Like, this is going to be my moment. I opened every Romantasy book that I have, and I had tabbed all
That's
of
not where I thought this was going.
No, I tabbed all of the spicy scenes, and I was like, what about this as a reader personally made me cringe? And what about this did I feel was okay?
Interesting. Okay.
So I wrote it from the semblance of what language did I feel was appropriate? What language really made me roll my eyes and be like, that is horrendous. No one should ever say that. And no one ever does say that.
Don't say moist. Like that's out. You can't say moist.
Automatically out.
Did you use the word folds?
Never.
Thank God. I'm tired of the folds, Laura. Laura, there's folds everywhere.
Never.
Like a blanket.
Before we continue, though, thank you so much, Simon. This is clearly the very beginning of Jimmy's Romantasy era with this conversation and with this conversation with Gavin last night. But
when you said I opened up all these tabs, I was thinking you went to every adult site you could and just hit like the top video. Ding, that's what I thought you were going for. So when you said I opened up all my books, I was like, oh, he's an academic. I forgot.
I went that route with it, but you know, for sequels, we'll have to see. But it was one of those things too that I went into a bunch of Reddit forums and specifically looked at what readers were complaining about in terms of the language with these scenes. And I was like, what books are people liking because of how the way this is described, and what books and what verbiage and language specifically do people absolutely loathe? And I was like, I'm pretty much on par with what people are really hating. So we'll avoid that and we'll work at this over and over.
So when you write something like that, like what is your, like when you were writing it, you're like, you have intention, right? So is your goal to like make the reader hot and bothered, or are you trying to do more stuff through like the characters, right?
I think one is kind of an extension of the other, because my book is in first person. So it's first person POV, and she's feeling that way. So I feel like if you've connected to her enough, then you by extension will possibly feel that way. But I wanted it to be a culmination of tension that's been building throughout the book, and what that feels like for the character in that moment. Like, what does that moment of these two people finally coming together for her feel like? So by extension, you might relate to it. You might view it more from an outsider's perspective and be like, okay, relationship wise, like this kind of makes sense. But if you're connected to her by that point in the story, you yourself might feel it. it depends on the reader, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one of the interesting things. Like I've read a range of books, and I mean, one of the most important things in the human condition is sexual relationships, right? And
Yeah.
to be able to write that well, I think is an immense talent, but also as a reader, probably experience I haven't really had, because the best I can do is fat pink mast from our boy Georgie. And maybe avoid that phrase if you
Right? Yeah.
can. I get the feeling that George likes to be stepped on. I don't know why, but I get that vibe.
I could see that for him.
Yeah.
I could see that for him.
Public
Joanna, I
humiliation.
honestly don't know. I'm thinking it'll probably be longer, but I am planning each book out as I go. I have the very final scene in my head, but I am a combination discovery writer and somewhat planner. So
longer than a trilogy.
Yeah.
Oh my, you're just going for it. I like that.
Yeah, it's a lot of lore. It's a lot of lore. I mean, you know this about me. I like religion, so religion plays a very heavy influence.
Like religion.
I like religion in the sense that I like studying religion.
Yeah, let's clarify that statement, Laura.
Let's clarify that. And mythology. That's kind of my thing. So
it's our own little atheist corner over here. It's just you and I, and everyone else. Everyone else got to get up early tomorrow morning.
I call it Atheist Island for Jimmy and I. But I really wanted that to be a big part of what I wrote. So that has quite a bit of depth to it. And I want to make sure, I hate when books rush, but simultaneously I hate when books take too long. So I'm trying to find out for myself, what is that good balance of not overstaying my welcome, but simultaneously not underselling and under giving the reader what they deserve for the story to be complete. Because that bothers me deeply.
Yeah, I mean, but you want it to take its time, but you also don't want it to drag, and that is like
exactly
that's the problem with writing, is that some people are going to read it and go, for me, Feast for Crows, I'm like, this is a masterpiece, and some people here are like, this sucks,
this is terrible, we didn't need this book.
Yeah, so you have to find like how you're going to hit like 60% of people in that day.
Yeah. And it's an interesting shift too, because book 1 is a single first person POV narration and book 2 becomes multi POV narration. So yeah, it is. But it's
multiple person first person?
It is. Yeah.
Ooh, okay, little Pierce Brown over here. Laura Brown.
Yeah,
okay.
A little bit different. So yeah, we'll see. People might hate it, but they might like it too. We'll never know until you do it. So that's kind of where it's at.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, finishing is a skill. That's why so when I wrote something back, I think in like 2020, 2021, maybe, I wrote a short story, and I actually didn't really like the short story, but I had a scene that I really wanted to write. And coincidentally, when I sent it out to people, that was the scene that people seemed to like the most, which made me feel good, because I'm like, that's why I wrote this story. It had nothing to do with any of the other stuff. I honestly don't care about the other parts of the story. But finishing is a skill. And so is editing and everything else after that. I kind of just stopped at editing because I was like, oh, I don't like this. I have low self-esteem. I don't like going back over my work. I mean, I will say this, everyone tells you don't edit until you're done with your rough draft. Just and on the page, which, by the way, is not objectively true. You can do it however you want. I find editing as I go to be way more rewarding. I actually end up finding little ways of saying things or wording things that I want to make consistent throughout the, like, I'm more reminded of like, oh, what am I really trying to evoke in the scene or thematically? And it helps me choose the right words. Like the diction is very important to me, and it's important when I read too. So for me, I'm like the anti Stephen King, I guess. I don't want to just vomit a draft, because the idea of going back and, I mean, I'm not saying I don't want to edit. That's not what I'm saying. But I'd rather do a lot of the line by line stuff as I go, which is probably, I'm doomed. If I were ever to write, I'd be another George R. R. Martin, where I don't finish my long series. People say like, oh, well, he's not a great writer because he can't write endings. They just ignore the fact that he wrote like so many I mean, well, not only that, but like he has so many sci-fi books that when he wrote short stories, I mean, he has a short story book that's 2 parts long. I can go get it. It is this big. I mean, that man, 1, has done endings, but 2, he actually has really good endings. Like his endings are actually great.
A lot of people that do complete their series, the endings are not fantastic, like Stephen King.
Yeah, but even Stevie, even old Stevie, you know, he has some good endings though.
He does, but he's someone that is there is a lot of contention, I feel like, around a lot of his endings. So I mean, there is a skill and an art to it for sure. And I think that just because you do complete something doesn't mean that you've necessarily completed it well.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, but it's a whole thing. I'm actually different in that I have people read as I'm writing. So my first draft is read by people as I'm continuing to write. Because sometimes my ADD brain kicks in and I'm like, yep. And I veered completely off course. And someone's like, you did not talk about this beforehand. And I'm like, I definitely did. And they're like, no, you did not. So it kind of reins me in a little bit, which has been very helpful. But I'm also in a writer's group where we share as we progress. So that's been an interesting experience too. And that works for me. Whereas other people want to get a whole draft out before they share it with anybody. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it just depends on the setup you have, who's around you, what they're going to do. I mean, having a writers group can be a huge benefit. Also, probably could be a huge detriment too. I mean, I've heard Sanderson talk about, like, you know, you never know whose advice you're following. For instance, I joined a writing group way back in the day, and I was writing something stupid. I can't remember. I never finished it, but I had actually picked kind of like an omniscient third person to open the book.
Oh, cool.
And like a prologue, and then move into a more third person limited or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it was. And the writing group feedback was that I should change it to third person multi POV because that's what most books do now. And I was like, oh, no. That is not what I'm after. I'm more after trying to execute my vision and what I want. Like, I don't give a damn if it's marketable. That doesn't bother me. But you know, it also depends on your goals, right? This is writers that were all trying to get published, and they were very serious. And honestly, they were all better than me too, to be fair. Like, but I was just like, oh, this probably isn't the group for me. This probably wouldn't work. So
you've read some of your stuff that you've written. I think it's quite good. So I think you should probably get back to it at some point. But
you think so?
I do.
You think
I also agree with Zeely Green here that Smut should be an international holiday.
Oh, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. But I do think you should get back to writing.
Well, fun fact, I actually just enrolled in a writing class in
Did you?
January. Yeah, I will be actually doing a writing class. So I'm gonna have, as Erickson says, I'm gonna have a reason to write and permission to write. And yeah, I'm kind of nervous. It'll be a group full of strangers at the college that don't know me.
Yeah.
And we'll see what they think.
This is an in-person thing.
So it is Zoom based, unfortunately.
Okay. That's so fun.
They did not have an in-person option, or I would have done it. But at the end of the way you pass is you write a short story, and then everyone reads it. And my short story is going to be a short story about a couple in a funeral home talking to the funeral director, and he turns a page for the casket because they're burying their child, and he realizes that the child's casket costs just as much as the adult casket, and he loses his mind. And that's the story.
I feel that's almost like a Seinfeld episode where it's like the insanity.
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, for me, it's more anger because I feel like we have to pay to grieve appropriately, which I think is like disgusting. And, you know, capitalism, brother, you know, all that stuff. So I think that the story will be something that I've actually had this idea for many years. So I really want to write it. But I mean, how many side eyes am I going to get in that class? Like, this guy's weird.
I mean, you'll find your people. There's going to be at least one other of you. So, you know,
I'll probably be the oldest guy there too, though, because it's, you know, college. It's a community college as well. So it's not like, I'm not going to stand.
You never know. You never know. I had in my undergrad, a really nice woman who was in her late 40s that had gone back to school and was completing her degree. And I ended up chatting with her and hanging out with her. So you never know. It is.
That's cool because I switched to physics when I was like 24 and I was doing some in-person stuff then. And I remember feeling old at 24.
Yeah.
So being 34 now, I couldn't even imagine. Like I couldn't relate to anybody in the class. You know, I was like, this is great. people look at me like I'm the wise old elder. Like I'd say something like, shit, that was profound.
You must
And
know
I'm like,
things.
oh God, this is terrible. It made me feel terrible.
I feel
But
like
hey,
it's different with humanities though. I don't know. I feel like for creative writing and stuff, it's a bit different because people will decide at different points in their life that that's the time they're going to start writing. So you never know.
That's true. That's true. And a lot of people like I just said, and like Erickson said, like if some people need that permission to write, because like I can sit here with an open Word document, but like, whether or not it's like, oh, well, I should probably go to the gym, or maybe I should do some extra work, or maybe I should just play video games. I mean, it could also be that. It's not like it's always I'm being pulled away because I'm productive. That's not always true either.
Yeah.
And it's a very up and down process, as you know. Like some days you're like, I got it. And then some days you're like, what am I doing?
This is garbage. I've said that so many times. I've written like a full page and I'm like, this is great as I'm writing it. And then I reread it later and I'm like, garbage. And I delete the whole thing and start over. And I'm like, what were you thinking? This is terrible. But you initially have that spark and you're like, oh my God, this makes perfect sense. And then you read it afterwards and you go, this makes sense to no one, including you, the author. Delete. So yeah.
I'm a big fan of reading aloud. I know that's very popular.
I love it.
But I think to me, it's one of the most important pieces. Yeah.
I absolutely love it. Slay, thank you so much. He did get me to say this is my smut day. So that's what everyone will take away from this.
That's just who I am. I pull out everyone's best.
That's why you're here, Jimmy. Let's see. Mrs. Nuts is leading the charge. Yeah, I mean, I think Kelsey has been kind of pushing you to maybe read a little bit of Romantasy for a while.
She seems like she's having fun, and like I make her read all my books, so shouldn't I read some of hers? Like, isn't that just fair at some point?
So. I mean, I like to think so. I keep telling Josh the best Christmas gift he could give me would be to read ACOTAR so we could talk about it.
But, do you think he would like it? Do you think he would enjoy it?
No, not even a little.
Why not?
It's just not his vibe at all. I feel like he's not one for fairy tales in general, which the first ACOTAR book is very much a fairy tale retelling. So that won't work well for him. And I think the later books would potentially work better because I think her character work gets better as the series goes on. But he would be struggling a lot with everything needs to make sense like immediately type thing. And he's not a journey before destination type of guy. He's a destination guy. So I think
not read Malazan. Whatever.
No, I think he'll hate it. I think he will hate it.
Malazan. Yeah,
we do have Gardens of the Moon here that we do want to try at some point because last year I walked in before I was really into my booktube journey. Walked into Barnes and Noble and I was like, that's a cool cover. And I picked it up and I had no idea and I bought it. And then I came home and everyone was talking about this terrifying book on YouTube. And I was like, well, that's the book I just bought. Great. And it has remained unread since then. So yeah, it's good.
I remember it being like that and Stormlight actually. Cause I remember like watching a Daniel Green video, making a list, going and buying everything. I think I spent like $250 at Barnes and Noble that year, like 2019 or 18, whatever it was. And awesome. I remember just staring at Stormlight, Archive Way of Kings, and it was a mass market. It was so big. And I was like, what is in those pages? Like there must be something so magical in those pages. But I also felt this way about Malazan. And I actually, have you ever had an idea of a book before you've read it? Of like, you're like, I feel like it's like this. So I have a very specific feeling of Malazan. I remember reading a Reddit thread or something, again, back in like 2018, 19, and people describing Malazan. And you're like, one line could be happening on a different continent in a different room, and it would affect this thing. And I just had this idea in my head of like what that would look like. Yeah. And somehow like what I experienced was not that, which is fine because I loved what I experienced. That's like, that's my jam. But now, like, I want to write that. I would like to write, but I don't know what I'm imagining is so magnificent that it would, I don't know if if anyone would have the ability to do said thing. So
it is hard when you get that kind of idea and you don't know how to properly articulate it. and it's frustrating because it's just ruminating with you for so long. Not to say that my book is like the best thing ever written, because I would never claim that, but I had this idea like 6 years ago, and I had a very basic idea of what the world was and how it worked and the magic. And every year I would say to Josh, I was like, I think this is how I can make this work, because I was just like, what's the story? Like, I have the world, but what the hell is the story? And I couldn't make any of it make sense. I had written multiple prologues. I wrote multiple chapters. I had characters, all this kind of stuff. And I would get to this point where I was like, I have no idea why this is even a book. Like, why is this a book? The world is cool, but why is this a book, Josh? And he was like, I can't answer this for you. And it finally just clicked one day. So sometimes it takes a while.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And things evolve and it changes as you change and whatnot. Thank you, Mrs. Nuts.
Hi, Kelsey.
Laura says hello. She said, she gave a hand wave.
I'll take it.
She doesn't like her voice, so she doesn't like it to be heard on microphone. She's not a fan.
I think Kelsey's voice is very lovely.
I think she's wonderful. I think she's great.
So too. I think so too.
So when I read Lord of the Rings for the first time, I was like 10 or 11 years old. And
good for you.
Oh yeah, but I remember being at the top of a page, reading it and being like, I didn't understand a single word in that sentence. And then knowing I had a whole page to go. And while it was defeating when I was 11. Yeah. I remember feeling, because I had read the Bible back to front to back many times. Yeah. And I remember that feeling of being like, there's so much in this. Like, how do you pick up on everything? And I felt that way with Lord of the Rings when I was 10 or 11. Now I've read it multiple times since I've been an adult. But I would love to somehow capture that again as an adult. And I think that's what I was thinking Malazan was going to be.
Sure. I get that.
And it wasn't. And Malazan was its own totally different thing. And I loved it for what it was, for sure. But like, I'm still searching almost a little bit for that. I think the closest I've gotten to that has been either the little bit I've read of the Odyssey or Book of the New Sun. I think Book of the New Sun is also that way. Yeah.
I could definitely feel that way for an epic, for sure.
Yeah,
I think that makes sense.
I just got the Emily Wilson translation, and I just read the first book of it. And I'll be honest with you, Laura, I don't understand anything that's happening. Like, I don't know any of these big, Perseus or Pocahontas. I'm like, I don't know any of this shit.
Have you read the Iliad? Well, it's kind of a book too. It's kind of a book too, Jimmy.
Wait, which one's first, Iliad or Odyssey?
Iliad's first. The Odyssey.
How about the Iliad?
Okay.
Because that's Emily Wilson, right?
She's done both. Shit.
Yeah. Shit.
How
about one of them? I don't know. It starts out with the book one is called the. I don't remember what it's called. I don't remember. Somebody.
Is it talking about Achilles in book one?
Yes.
It's the Iliad.
So I'm good.
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, thank goodness.
You're good. Okay. It's good. Evie read that last year and is now reading the Odyssey. So if you need someone to confer with, she's a very good resource. But
I would love to read more of it, but it's just so confusing.
I think she is the most approachable with it, but I will say you have to be in the right mood. Like, you really have to be in the right mood, I feel like. And it's one of the things I think we forget too in our modern times is that this was performed and sung. Like, it was never really intended to be read.
So I should sing it.
Yeah, you should. You should be standing there and singing it at Kelsey. And then based on her interpretation, that's how you should feel about it. So,
Achilles. Yeah, that would be good. Yeah,
it would be good.
I need Gavin to sing it for me. That would be excellent.
Gavin could sing anything, and it would be perfection.
In that nunnery, very specific.
Exactly.
In the nunnery.
Gavin, I don't know if you're still here.
He should be. He should be. Mitch said Bible underrated, top-notch prose and lore. A little grimdark. I would say.
Book of Revelation, especially. I would say it's definitely some grimdark stuff happening, but also a fantastic fantasy read if that's your vibe. Like,
Laura, what's your favorite book of the Bible?
Oh,
let's love bomb the Bible.
Okay, so I really like Axe because
Okay,
it's like
the upper room.
super trippy. Axe is super trippy.
Okay.
And Book of Revelation for like
Oh, it's metal.
all of the things that are happening. Also, I think the Book of Revelation has the best quote of the Bible, like the best quote of the Bible,
Which
which is
is?
I am the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the ending. And like it's so good. I am the Alpha, the Omega, the beginning and the end. And I'm missing a part of it. What is the third part of it? Do you know it?
I can't remember the exact quote. No.
Oh, what is it? I'm looking it up now. The Alpha and the Omega Bible verse.
I say it
Come
every time
on.
I walk into rooms. I don't know why people think I'm arrogant. It's very weird.
I am the Alpha Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end, which I think is like just it hits.
If you opened up a fantasy book with that in the prologue, you'd be like, let's go.
Let's
Randolph
go. Oh man, it slaps. It's such a good line.
It's a banger.
So
It's a banger.
yeah, I mean, it's a really good line. So in terms of just like
who wrote Revelation?
studying,
John? Did John write Revelation?
That's what they say.
Well,
so yeah.
Alleged.
Yeah, that's what they say. But yeah. How about you? What's your favorite book of the Bible?
Ooh, I like Judges quite a bit because I think McCarthy had pulled from. I know, we do not stand Cormac anymore, but
no, I
have enjoyed his prose over the years, and I think that he takes a lot from the book of Judges. So I like Judges. I like Genesis because it's funny. I like Revelation quite a bit. I love the Gospels because it's kind of like, nuh-uh. This has, I like that quite a bit. Romans is fun. I think Romans is fun. If I'm if I'm not being a cheeky piece of shit, the best one's actually Proverbs. I think Proverbs actually has some very applicable things. I think it's a beautiful Psalms and Proverbs are both beautiful. I think that they actually have something that, like, even if you're not a believer, I think they're worth reading.
I agree.
Gavin said he's gonna sing it in his most revealing nun outfit.
I'll take it.
I would love that. So
wouldn't that be amazing? That would be absolutely fantastic. Job is
Job is great. Job is great.
Intense.
Yeah, Job is intense. I've actually thought about doing a fantasy retelling of Job. That's one of my story ideas on my notepad I have. Because I do think that Job is such an interesting story that how people choose to interpret it is very interesting, because I interpret it now in a more like post-religious part of my life. I interpret it in a very different way.
Yeah. Yes. I knew someone, for context for people that aren't Jimmy, that don't know this about me, but I also used to be quite religious. And have since moved beyond that point in my life where I enjoy talking about religion and studying religion, but I myself am not religious. But I knew someone during the peak of my religiosity who was dying, who was my age. And he did pass away. And his last Facebook status was a quote from Job. And it was, the Lord taketh and the Lord, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And I was like, this is, it can be definitely interpreted on multiple levels.
Certainly.
But yeah, I mean, I actually really like biblical books that didn't make it into the Bible. Those are fun to read. Like Thomas, the Gospel of Thomas is a trip.
So anyone that's even vaguely interested in religion should read the books that were not included, for sure.
Oh yeah, they're really fascinating. And Enoch is
bizarre,
a prophetic book, which is like amazing to read. If you read it in conjunction with the book of Daniel, it is really fascinating. So yeah, this would probably be my top choices. Apocalyptic books are generally the ones that I tend to lean
I
towards.
do like apocalyptic / post-apocalyptic. The problem with apocalypse movies, though, is that apocalypse movies always have the subplot. Literally, go watch any of them. I promise you 90% of them have the subplot of marital issues or divorced, child with one parent, and then they find their love again to come back together. It makes me so mad that it has to be included. And every single Hollywood thing, it's like, I don't know why people feel the need to include it. I get it. When tragedy happens, it pulls us together. 9/11 comes to mind. I whatever. Anytime something big happens, it does pull people back together. However, It's not needed. There's so many different things you could think about whenever it comes to the apocalypse. And this is one thing. So I read We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle, and I thought it was just okay. I think Mike Shackle's I think he has some cool ideas. I would like to see what he does next, but it wasn't anything special. However, the one thing I love, this is my wrap up, is that he had a character that's in this post-evasion, I mean, almost apocalyptic type event for his society. And he is like, they're like trying to go back. And he's like, I don't want to go back to what we had. I was destroyed by that system. You guys spit on me and treated me like a dog. Like, eat my shorts. We're not going back. I'm going to kill them, but I would just as easily kill you. And I'm like, that is what I want from the apocalypse. I want a leveling of just watching, the levels of society, the caste system just fall down. Yeah, I want that. I think that's far more interesting than, oh, Jared, we divorced in 97, but Marla, our daughter, has really brought us back together. Like, that's a fine story to tell, but it's been told so many times. Like, I don't need Gerard Butler.
It's always Gerard Butler, though. It's always Gerard Butler. He's lived through multiple apocalypses. Like, honestly, at this point, if the apocalypse does come, I'm going to find him and use him as a life raft because that's my way to survive.
He's the first one to go. The fault line in San Andreas, it's just going to fall off, and he's going to go into the ocean because I'm sure he lives in Hollywood. I assume he lives in Hollywood.
I mean, in my mind, he's still wandering around like Ireland somewhere, but he's probably in California.
Probably. Hey, look at this. Kale said that doesn't happen in Threads. That movie is miserable British. Now, is that miserable in a good way, Kale? Or is that miserable in like don't watch it kind of way? Like what do you mean by that? Because like for instance, The Road is a great post-apocalyptic movie. It's all about finding the light, sun and fire. I keep referencing old Cormac, who we do not stand. We do not stand with Cormac.
I've never liked his stuff because it's Western, so I refuse to read it. So
it's not all Western. It's not all Western.
No, but honestly, like it's just not my thing. So for me,
that's fair. I mean, now you definitely can abstain.
I can step aside and feel like this was not my big hit this year. My big hit came earlier in the year.
Love when authors do horrible things because it shortens my TBR. And honestly, at this point, anything to get these books off my TBR.
It's like it's real quick now. It's really quick. Threads is good, is what he's saying. So there you go.
Authors can like the wrong tweet and they're gone. I don't care.
I know.
I'm looking for anything.
Gotta go. But
Book of Eli, Zealy Green. Book of Eli is a banger of a movie. A little bit too much religious overtones for me, but I genuinely really like that movie. Good performance too.
What was I going to say? Oh yeah. Speaking of apocalypses or end of world scenarios that I think about regularly is the Bone Clocks, like regularly. And I read that this year because of you, because you told me that you thought I would like that book. And initially I was like, Jimmy, you're wrong. I'm not liking this book at all. And then I ended up loving that book. But I think about the ending of that book like every few days. It has stuck with me in this way that I just can't even explain to people.
Here's the thing. We could love bomb David Mitchell right now because we're kind of dropping bombs everywhere. We're going to be like the US in the next like 4 to 8 years. We're just going to drop bombs everywhere.
You're trying to get me demonetized so badly tonight.
Yeah, my bad. I am drinking a little bit. I hope you don't mind.
I saw you ran out of Hennessy yesterday. So what are we drinking today?
Today is Tully, House Tully Scotch, actually.
Very nice.
And I was just telling Kelsey that I'm sad because like I'm not a big drinker. So I've been drinking these Game of Thrones scotches over the last 4 or 5 years. And one day they're going to be empty. And I'm going to be like,
sad.
Yeah, because every time I go, I think of like all the good times I've had with the books and the show and stuff. You know what I mean? So, but anyways, so the thing about Mitchell in Bone Clocks is when I talk about Cloud Atlas, it is very easy to like kind of explain how amazingly deep and wide the book is. Bone Clocks is almost sneakily a massive achievement in many ways. Because if you describe Bone Clocks to someone, how do you even begin? Because you get a war reporter in Iraq, you get a young teenage, very abrasive girl in Britain, and then it ends up somehow, and it's about a writer. It's also about a ski lodge. but it's also about climate and apocalypse in many ways.
Ski lodge. That would not have been in my descriptors for that book, but I like that you went to the ski lodge. Yeah, that, and it fits. It fits.
It's so good. It's
oh
so
my God,
good.
that's hysterical. That's the thing that I feel like, I don't know if I would classify Holly as abrasive, as like a young abrasive person.
I'm gonna run from home and I'm gonna date the guy my parents.
She's a teenager who's in a bad spot.
Yeah, all teenagers suck, right? Like teenagers suck.
Most of them do. I can attest to that. Most of them do. But I would say that she is someone who is almost a byproduct of her circumstances. But
sure.
like it is one of the best character studies I've ever read, if not the best character study I've ever read. And that's probably the way that I would go about describing the book. I would be like, it has an apocalyptic overtone, but it's a character study. And that would probably, and has a ski lodge, clearly. So
it has a ski lodge with a devious character. An absolute devious character.
Oh my God. Hugo is just the villain of villains. He is a good villain.
He's so good because he exists in this world. And man, the way that David Mitchell is able to make him seem human at moments after he just gets off the phone doing something horrible, you're just like, wow. I genuinely believe that David Mitchell, I think you could make an argument he might be the best writer. Like, because he's entertaining, he is thoughtful, he is funny, he's introspective. He also takes on ridiculous tasks within his books once you look back on them. Like, it's really hard for me to think about someone who is as good as David Mitchell. And I think that like the way he writes about other authors really does like it speaks to the fact that he caught on to the right things about certain writers. Like, he's a really big Le Guin fan, and Le Guin has her problems. I think like there's some things about Le Guin I don't love, but I generally like do love her works.
Yeah.
But the way that he embraced some of Le Guin's works and the things he took from it, like you could just tell he's like a sampler of all these things and then is writing these books that are, for all intents and purposes, just about as weird as a melting pot of his influences. Oh, dude. I mean, I think about Bone Clocks at least once a week, and Cloud Atlas as well. Cloud Atlas is the second best book I've ever read.
I never would have thought when I started that book, because I started that book and I was like, what is happening here? And was like, what has Jimmy given me in this book? Like,
you earned a lot of brownie points for liking it. I got to tell you.
I messaged Joanna and I was like, what in the actual hell is happening? Like, I am so confused. And then she told me it was free on Audible. And I was like, all right, I'm diving in with the audiobook. The audiobook is incredible because it's like 6 different narrators throughout, which is amazing and highly unusual for a book that's free, Yeah. And it's just so well done. Like it's that is a book of trusting the author to just take you on a journey and allowing yourself to be a passenger for a ride and enjoying it as it goes. What a book.
And his dialogue is wonderful.
Incredible.
We always talk about Joe Abercrombie. I know we both love Joe Abercrombie, especially his dialogue. But David Mitchell is also somebody who just understands the way people interact with one another. And I don't know. I would love to sit down and talk to David Mitchell. Not to have him be on camera. I would just love to talk to him. And I think if I could emulate one writer, it would probably be him. I think that he's just wonderful.
That would be incredible, honestly, if you could talk to him or emulate him, one or the other.
Laura, listen. I don't know if you'd like Cloud Atlas, but
I'm going to try it at some point.
What BellTube just said, Timothy Cavendish for life. If anything, just read the Timothy Cavendish portion. Okay. Timothy Cavendish rivals Hershey.
Crispin? He rivals Crispin? Oh my God.
And the pettiness and just...
I love Crispin Hershey. As you know, I have been gushing about Crispin Hershey all year.
So let me tell you, Timothy Cavendish tops that for me because he is a man trapped in a retirement home and is... But here's the thing, you would sound like he was literally wrongfully institutionalized, right? But you're also trying to figure out, like, was he?
Okay.
But at the same time, the more you learn about him, the more you're like, screw this guy. I'm glad he's in there because
okay. I will have to read at least Timothy Cavendish.
Timothy Cavendish, you could literally just the way Atlas works is first in for last out kind of thing. So like you start with one story, you go to the next, and then in like the middle is actually like as long as two short stories, and then you go back out. So the first story you read is the last one you read. So you could read Timothy Cavendish by itself. You could read its first part and the second part as a contained story, and it works. And oh my gosh, it's like a BBC comedy. Like it's so good. It's so good.
Honestly, just equating him to Crispin is a lot for me. So that earns at least a read.
Crispin and Cavendish would make a top 10 POV.
Oh, Crispin is so good. He is so good.
Good is a weird word to use, right?
He is fantastic to read. Fantastic to read. Honestly, like Crispin's chapter in that book is arguably one of my favorite things I've ever read. And it just is like every emotion possible in one chapter. Like it's just so like I can't think of another chapter that I've ever read where I have felt such vacillating emotions. From you just know, you will know if you read it. Like I can't articulate it properly unless people have read it without being too spoilery about it, which I don't want to be because it takes away the magic.
You have to roll through it and
you just have to get through it. But
I think that
incredible.
People dream of writing a character that good. I also feel as if he's a great example of someone that can be so detestable without being I abuse every single woman I walk across. Right. He actually isn't that for all the things that he is. And is also somehow still human, which is the hardest part maybe of all to do because of how strongly I felt about him. David Mitchell. So I've been saying this to a couple people that I've been talking to. It's like, so right now I'm reading Wind of Truth. I'm reading all these things. I got some stuff I got to read because of patron picks or whatever. But if I was doing what I wanted to do, I would be reading David Mitchell back to back to back to back. Yeah. Which 2025, that's what I'm going to do everything I want to do. So it's going to be a bunch of Ishiguro and it's going to be a bunch of David Mitchell for sure.
Which I also read Ishiguro this year because you suggested it.
So would you say it was as big of a hit as Bone Clocks?
Not as big, no.
Okay. That's fair.
Not as big. I read The Remains of the Day, so that's the only Ishiguro that I've read. I really did enjoy it. The audiobook was great.
The audiobook's so good.
Yeah. So good. Stevens made me so anxious.
My dad is dying, but I really need to get the tea out to the guests.
This is the proper way to be a butler in this moment. I was like, sit down. Like it was just, I was so anxious while listening. And I think for me, that did two things. One, it articulated how powerful the book is, that it was able to evoke that kind of emotion in me. But simultaneously, I was like, this is like making me uncomfortable to listen to because I am now anxiety ridden. It's just, like I was like fidgeting and I was like, I need to go for a walk. Like it was in the summer that I was listening to it. I was like, it's 1,000 degrees outside. I need to move. So I was pacing up and down my driveway, just like listening to it and just feeling like I had to get energy out. So it was an experience. I enjoyed it. Will I ever listen to it again? No. But I am happy I read it.
I had a friend read it recently and I wasn't sure, they don't read a ton of lit fic and they've never read Ishiguro and they came away and they said, that is the best book I've ever read. And it made me so happy because I do think there's something there that is just like, it transcends a butler story taking a couple days vacation. It really does. And when I was watching the interview with Ishiguro about the book, he said that every single one of us is an English butler. And I was like, wait, what? And he's talking about how a butler surrenders himself to the person he's representing, that he's trusting that they will make the right decisions for them and morally as well. And we all do that to whoever is above us and the governments we serve and the powers we serve, our bosses, whatever, the companies we work for. in some way, shape, or form, we surrender that power of that. And Ishiguro said it much better than I did. But oh my goodness, when I heard that, and I read the book, what, a year or two ago, when I heard that, it like sucked me back into the book and remembering all the moments with the butler. It's just like, man, that is so powerful. Also, to see something become antiquated during the period is something very strange. And it's also something that we have lived through for people our age, and many people will live through again. So I think the book will remain relevant because of that. The idea of an English butler post World War II,
right,
doesn't really, I mean, I'm sure they exist, but it's not what it once was. And to dedicate yourself to a craft, I do think there's some nobility to it. But without a doubt, once you start counting the cost of it, it can be very steep and very difficult to swallow. So watching Stevens go through that is, like you said, it's anxiety inducing, because you're like, this is your life. You only get a certain amount of rotations around the sun and you're dead. And how do you spend that, and how much authority, a representation of yourself do you give away to someone else, is very interesting.
It was also just so metaphorical, right? Like the whole book is metaphorical. And that even though Stevens is a butler, it's applicable to literally anything in your life that you devote that much time to.
Sure.
And what you choose to perfect, what you choose to hone in on as your thing. What is your person, your identity?
Yes.
And that for me was the big takeaway. I was like, what is my identity? Like, am I focusing too much on these things? Have I not spread myself wide enough? Like, is it too hyper focused? Like, what is this a problem? And I think that made the anxiety worse. But simultaneously, it's good questions to ask yourself as you're going through this journey with Stevens, because I very much am a hyper focuser. It's something, I was diagnosed with ADD this year. And
congratulations.
Thank you. It took a long time. It took 34 years, almost 35 years, to get this diagnosis. And I never thought about it in a way that, like, I will sit down and do something for 12 hours and not move. And
you played WoW back in the day, right?
Oh, I did. It's how I met my husband. You know this.
I knew that, but that's all making sense.
Anytime I would sit down to write a graduate paper, I would literally start at like 8 a.m. I would not move until 8 or 9 p.m. that night. I hadn't eaten. I did not leave my space. And I would just be like, this is normal. This is what people do. And then, and totally thought this was fine until my therapist this year was like, that's not what people do. People eat throughout the day. And I was like, that's probably true. People probably do nourish themselves. I just forget sometimes. And that reading that was kind of one of those moments for me where I was like, oh yeah, like I do that with certain things in my life. And I don't know how to have that disconnect. And that disconnect causes major anxiety for me. Like if I'm not working, I struggle with not working. That for me is a really big thing. So
time anxiety is what it's called.
Yes. So I do have time anxiety. That for me is like a big, big problem. So Stevens and I were real close for the like 11 hours of that audiobook that we spent together. And I was like, well, this has been a journey, Stevens, and I need for us to part ways now.
Well, he's hyper-focused. I mean, he certainly is. And watching him and his dad's relationship, that affected me greatly. But also, folks, this is not just a depressing book. It is hilarious.
It is very funny.
If you like British humor, the thing Alan liked about it was Downton Abbey is what he related to. So if you're a fan of that, he said
that's how you sold it to me. You were like, if you like Downton Abbey, you'll probably like this book. And I was like, I do very much like Downton Abbey.
Well, it's almost a 1-for-1. So
almost.
Yeah, I've never watched Downton Abbey actually, which is funny. I just know from multiple people saying that like those two things go together very, very well. I
wonder if you'd like Downton Abbey. I don't know.
Oh, I probably would. Almost guaranteed I would. Yeah. I've heard some people relate it to like Seinfeld, where like the conflicts are like very nonsensical, or not nonsensical.
No, a lot of them aren't, but I mean, a lot of them too are very time period specific. So,
fair.
Like over dress and purity are very time period specific things. But you're also reading a period piece right now, aren't you? You're reading Wolf Hall, or you were reading Wolf Hall?
I am. Yeah, I'm reading it very slowly because holy shit, that book is dense.
Yeah.
But I love it.
Read it, but are you liking it?
Yeah, I love it. But like,
it's a lot. It's
a lot because of the way that she writes the book. So Steve Donahue is a huge champion of the book, and he refers to it as the he problem, because once you hit part 3, she just starts referring to Thomas Cromwell as he. So I'll be talking to another male and be like, he said, and you're like, well, which he was it?
Right.
Like, it's very confusing.
That's odd.
It's maybe the most oddly written book I've ever read. And that's saying a lot because I like to kind of
You've read some odd books.
I like reading odd books.
I know you do. Yeah.
But when things land, oh my goodness, do they land? And I need to be upfront. I do not care about the Tudors. I don't understand the obsession with the Tudors.
Fair.
I don't care about Anne Boleyn that much. I think Henry VIII is somewhat interesting. I think the things based off Henry VIII are more interesting than Henry VIII.
He definitely had post-concussion syndrome, like 1,000%.
Oh, he was messed up. I mean, George used Henry VIII, personality traits of Henry VIII in multiple characters, actually.
And it shows.
Yeah, and he's upfront about that. Like he is a huge Henry VIII guy. So he basically split up Henry VIII and then mixed in other historical figures as well, and whatever, and some fantasy characters from back in the day, like Zelazny's Amber books. But neither here nor there. I'm not even a huge fan of the Tudor period, and I still think that book has some moments that you're just mesmerized sentence by sentence. The way she says things is not obvious sometimes. Like I'll read a chapter and then I'll read, like, I'll be like, what just happened? And people are like, oh, like they're talking about Thomas Cromwell having an affair with his dead wife's sister. I'm like, what? Like that happened in that chapter? Like, Book of the New Sun has nothing on Wolf Hall, but it is magnificent at sometimes. Gavin says, oh, I'm glad you didn't bring up the Anne Boleyn slander last night. First Princess, former Queen of England blasphemy. No, it's not that I don't like Anne Boleyn. It's just that like there are people who like, I lived a former life as Anne, and I'm like, first off, I don't believe you. But two, like, I don't know. It's never done a lot for me. Now, maybe after Wolf Hall, I'll be a little bit more interested. The one thing that I've always found interesting about Anne Boleyn has nothing to do with Anne Boleyn. It has everything to do with Marjorie Tyrell, because Marjorie Tyrell largely is based on Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn's neck is described as one that could be cut, I believe. And so is Marjorie Tyrell's.
It sure is.
And Marjorie Tyrell is also chasing royal marriages through A Song of Ice and Fire. Yeah. And my theory for Winds of Winter, which this isn't really a spoiler, is that she will attempt to marry young Griff when he takes the throne. And I'm assuming he takes the throne, and he will have her beheaded.
Okay.
And that will cause some turmoil because Marjorie Tyrell is beloved as in her status from the small folk, which will be very interesting to see what happens from there. So Marjorie Tyrell is like an Anne Boleyn stand-in.
Yeah, she is.
In many ways in the A Song of Ice and Fire universe. So I find that fascinating. I love that.
Yeah.
And the first person ever to point that out to me, by the way, was Adrienne Dillard, who is an author. She writes, she publishes historical fiction mostly around the Tudor period. Anne Boleyn. She's done
makes sense.
3 or 4 books, and she actually was a patron of Bend the Knee of my Song of Ice Fire podcast, and she brought this huge dissertation about Anne Boleyn and Marjorie Tyrell, and it blew my mind. Oh yeah, it was sick. It was great.
I love that. I love British history, so I went through my Tudor phase.
And Gavin hit it. Natalie Dormer played both.
She did. She sure did. That was actually how I knew her first, was as Anne Boleyn, which I thought she was a very good Anne Boleyn. And then she was the same as Marjorie.
George picked a lot of the cast.
Yeah. Which makes sense. And the casting was great. The casting was great. So
perfect for almost every single thing. Yeah.
Almost. Sure. Yes. Yeah.
Except Euron.
Yes.
This is a love bomb. We won't go there.
That was a hit and a miss. I will say the casting that I wanted to happen for the character that I desperately wanted to happen was I wanted Victorian. I really wanted.
Oh, I mean, I could go on a 9-minute rant, 9 minutes specifically.
I could time you if you want specifically.
I mean, Greyjoys were done dirty and Dorne was done dirty. And we recently did an episode on Bend the Knee where we went over a chapter where Oberyn Martell actually shows up to King's Landing first time in A Storm of Swords. We're doing a chapter by chapter review. And I said, yeah, well, one of the things that people, when they're predicting the books is that, and I see everybody forget it. I mean, everybody, even the big timers, they just completely ignore Dorne, which is preposterous. I mean, because Dorne is such a massive deal in the books.
Yeah.
And so is Victarion. Victarion is huge. And Victarion is almost like, in some ways, a lens to which view Euron through, because is he this apocalyptic, almost Christ-like figure, or is he a liar?
Insane.
Yeah. Is he a sociopath?
Yeah.
He might be both.
I go with the latter personally, but because of the Greyjoys, Victarion is my favorite. So I think he's insane as well. But I feel like we were robbed of Ray Stevenson playing him. Like that was who was meant to be Victarion. Like in my mind, that was it. And I remember when we were coming up on that time in the show, I was like, I'm just waiting. Like I'm waiting for this casting announcement. And then it never came.
Yeah. What about just a dude that's like batshit full of trauma leading a ship? Just something about that that's just like
plate on a ship always.
Like there's just something about that is so fun.
He's insane, but in the best way. Like honestly, as soon as his descriptor was that he wears plate on a ship, I was like, I'm in. Like he is nuts, Like, and it just got progressively better from there with him. So yeah, I feel like that was the one thing that casting wise we were truly robbed of Ray Stevenson.
Yeah, I think you can make an argument for most of the casting outside of that for sure. Like, I mean, honestly, I always forget her name, but the lady that played Catelyn Stark could not have been better. There's also an interview of her.
Fairly, I want to say is her name.
Yeah, something like that. So she's a sweetheart, by the way. There's an interview with her and Gurm on stage, and she's blasted. She's so drunk. You guys got to go watch it. It's so good. She's either on something or she's hammered the whole interview.
I love it.
Yeah. And George is just like, oh yeah, I like trains. And she's wearing a little hat. Like you got to go see it. It's great.
Yeah, I think she was pretty spot on. Josh is actually rereading a Game of Thrones right now.
Banger.
And it's been a while since he's read it. It's been even longer for me. I haven't reread it in like 12 years. So yeah, it's been a long.
I'm rereading next year. I've already decided I'm rereading next year.
I was gonna reread it with Josh, but he's like, I'm tired of waiting for you. So
good for Josh. Good for Josh.
Exactly. So he's doing it for himself and he's doing it live and it's great. But he and I were talking about it yesterday because one of the things that I always think is really interesting in terms of the female characters is that depending on when you read A Song of Ice and Fire in your life as a woman, you relate to the characters differently, I feel like.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And when I read it the first time, I wasn't a mother. So Catelyn, I read very differently from how I would read Catelyn now. And we were basically dissecting Catelyn as a character in the first, like, 40% of the book, maybe not even the first 40%, the first 30% of the book. And he was like, she is awful. And I was like, however. So it was just one of those really interesting things because when I read it the first time, I was definitely in the camp, she is terrible.
Oh, certainly. I mean, the way she treats Jon is despicable.
It's despicable. And then simultaneously, I was saying to Josh, I was like, this whole thing could have been solved had these two married people just talked to each other, but no.
What system are they living in, though? Right? It's an extreme patriarchy at this point. It is. And that affects everything, even down to the bedroom. I mean, like that's what people, I think that sometimes we lose sight of like how much influence like the systems we are in, like like everything, every single interaction that we have. Oh, yeah. And that can be tough. I think George does a pretty good job of that throughout that series.
Honestly, I agree. And it's just interesting with the characters when you revisit them. And I feel like looking back on it too, retroactively, I hated Sansa so much the first time I read it. I was like, what is wrong with you? Like, you know, it was just, oh my God, drove me nuts. But now I look back on it and I'm like, she's like 11 years old. Of course she's going to be an idiot. You know, I was like, this is what an 11-year-old does. Like, it's just.
And she just has dreams and aspirations. Like, what's so wrong with that? Have I given you my whole speech about Sansa being the fantasy reader? Have I done this? I won't do it again if I have.
No, you have not.
So she's a stand-in for the typical fantasy reader in 1996.
Fair.
because she believes in knights and honor and all these heroes and tales, and she is literally the fantasy reader going through the journey of being dismantled by her preconceived notions and her assumptions as you are reading Game of Thrones, which is subverting everything to that point in the genre. I'm not saying there weren't anti-heroes. Like, I get it. I know Thomas Covenant exists. Leave me alone. Whatever. But Sansa is a stand-in for the prototypical fantasy reader from Tolkien all the way through the 80s into the 90s. And you literally watch her. I mean, she even gets the unseemly knight, the knight, that comes to rescue her, Dante. It's all very textbook. And
that's so true. I never thought about it that way, but that is so true.
George is having a conversation with the genre.
Yeah.
He's the GOAT.
That's a good point. I never thought about it that way. But see, this is what I'm saying. Like, I was young when I read it the first time, and I never really thought about any of that other than the fact of how much Sansa annoyed me.
Sure. And she is annoying. She is annoying. Yeah.
But I do think it takes a very skilled author to be able to present you with characters that you can come back to and do a complete 180 on, depending on where you are in your life journey. Like, I think
those are people. Really interesting. Those are human beings, because I mean, I know people, whether it's your parents or grandparents or family or something, that you thought they were the absolute worst or made terrible, like maybe in a moment you thought they were the worst. And then when you get a little bit older, you start to recontextualize these things and you say, well, they were doing their best at the time. Like, that's how humans are. And I think the best characters reflect that. And on top of that, A Song of Ice and Fire is a really unique series in many ways, but one of the most striking ways is the fact that it includes a plot where you have to know what happens next. It includes characters that you want to see grow and hopefully reach their aspirations, and then also happens to have theory crafting and lore and religion and sexism. I mean, we could go through all these things. So it's not surprising that people miss that Sansa is the stand-in for the fantasy reader. That's not surprising, because there's about a zillion things you could pay attention to.
Subverted with all the other things going on.
There's a bazillion things you could pay attention to, which is why I've reread the series like 7 or 8 times, and every single time I either find something new or I end up appreciating something different from it. And that's kind of like Lord of the Rings. Fellowship of the Ring was my least favorite for so long. My recent reread, now it's my favorite. I hated the council. I've always hated the Council of Elrond, which I know makes me a bad person. I know. I love it in the show. I love it in the movie, but I did not like it in the book. And I loved it 2 years ago, I think, when I reread it.
I love it. I am the non-Tom Bombadil lover, so I get that hate because I can't stand Tom Bombadil. I'm like, get out. Just get out. I can't do it. But everything else.
The idea that he's so powerful and he's like, I would, but I have to simp for this lady is like my favorite
and
thing.
Sing at trees and like other annoying stuff. Oh my
Have you ever done mushrooms? No, I'm just kidding. No,
I have not, but I feel like I did with Tom Bombadil.
No, that's it. You got the experience.
I mean, I remember after I listened to the Andy Serkis narration, which is fantastic if you haven't listened to it. I was talking to Philip Chase, and he loves Tom Bombadil, and I was like, listen, I cannot stand this man. I don't like him. Not being in the movies is the best part of that trilogy for me. And Philip was like,
I disagree, but I understand why you would feel that way.
He was very understanding, as Dr. Chase is known to be. But
listen, I'm thinking about rereading Lord of the Rings after I finish Wind and Truth, because
Andy Serkis.
Every single time I just and I might not reread the whole trilogy, because honestly now I just want to reread Fellowship. The Shire has always been magical. I will say that even though Fellowship was my favorite, I could read the Shire beginning so many times and still love it every single time. I mean, it's wonderful. I think I actually need to do the Silmarillion. I think that's probably what's next for me.
That's an intense read.
It's also very biblical, which I think I would probably enjoy that. I want to dial back real quick to Game of Thrones, and I'm in a Storm of Swords in our reread right now for Bend the Knee, and we found something that I have never caught on 8 rereads. Okay. Are you ready for that? Are you ready for this?
Is this like? Is it being dropped here live?
I've honestly only heard one other person ever talk about it. It was in a random Reddit thread.
I'm ready.
Did you know that Jojen, Jojen Reed?
I sure do.
He refers to Bran as your grace multiple times.
Get out.
Isn't that insane?
Does he really?
Yes. Isn't that like...
That's wild. Is it like sarcastic?
Sure isn't. Isn't that intense? And one of them, there was like 3 points George gave D&D.
I know, that's one of the real ones.
And one of them was that one.
Bran.
And I know everyone like memes on it because the show didn't do it well, but like it could be done. It could be done very, very well.
Honestly, of all the things they did, I can live with that one. I can live with that one.
Oh yeah, we could get there because that whole journey is going to be very different.
It's different, exactly.
Yeah. Because at least into the fantastical, which people just, D&D wasn't interested. They said it that we were not interested in this thing. But my God.
I mean, that makes perfect sense for Jojen. Like perfect sense for
Jojen. Jojen's also just a weird guy because what are green dreams?
I really like Jojen Reed. Like the Reeds in general, I enjoyed.
Howland Reed's the biggest question mark because he's the only other person who's alive that was at Tower of Joy.
Tower of Joy. Yeah.
Like what?
You and I have talked about this a little bit because, and I'm veering off for a second for a rant. It's not a love, it's a rant. But the Tower of Joy scene in the show, like the first scene that we got, incredible. I loved it. Arthur Dane's fight scene, like perfection, 10 out of 10. I love the whole thing. I've rewatched it at least 50 times. I love it. When Bran revisits and talks to Ned, and it shows that he can clearly change the past, and then literally nothing comes of that. Like,
well, this is the problem, right? Because that's a sick reveal, but then you have to deal with the consequences of it.
And nothing changes.
Which George will be able to do because George has worked in sci-fi. I mean, he's done everything. So I have absolutely zero problems with George going down that route. I still find it to be a compelling story.
It is.
But they clearly did not.
They had no idea how to handle that and just didn't. So
you just don't, right? You just pretend it's not there.
We're just gonna ignore the massive thing that we introduced in the plot and then never talk about it again. I was like so excited when they did it, and then nothing.
But also, let's just put it out there. Like the Tower of Joy story is very suspect.
Oh yeah.
Arthur Dane lost to Howland Reed and Ned Stark. Are you kidding? Are you kidding?
I know.
Are you kidding?
I know. So here's a little fun story.
What happened?
When I was pregnant, Josh and I were going over baby names, and I was like, boy names has to be Arthur Dane, like full name, Arthur Dane.
Banger.
Right? And then he was like, that's absolutely not happening. So then when we got our most recent cat, which is Josh's cat, I was coming up with names because Josh was being useless for names. And I was like, Sir Arthur Dane, cat of the morning. I think it is perfect. And he was like, and just didn't acknowledge it. So I've tried twice for 2 Arthur Danes. Mind you, we didn't have a boy, we had a girl. So that was fine. But the cat could have been Sir Arthur Dane, cat of the morning. But
if I have a boy, I've always said I maybe would name him Leo because I like Leonin as a name because Leonin the Arbiter is my favorite Magic the Gathering card of all time, minus Talion, Guardian of Thrable, whatever. But the other name I would go with, Barristan.
Barristan's amazing.
Barristan.
But I want you to do what I couldn't do and do the full name. It's Barristan Salmi.
Middle name could be Arthur because we could just bang them both out and then he would be Ban. That would be his.
I love it. I love it so much. That's perfection. Do it.
Dude, Barristan Selmy.
Incredible.
When people list off badasses in books and they don't list Barristan Selmy.
I know, it's wrong.
Amanda Rick, Dalinar Cole. I don't care about any of them. Barristan the Bold.
I do care about Dalinar.
I guess.
Come on.
Hey, listen, Dalinar is nothing but a second-rate Logan Nine Fingers mixed with Joseph Smith. And think about it for about 5 seconds, and I've just ruined Dalinar. I ruined Dalinar, which I got to give credit to Mitch, who was in the chat. He actually messaged me. He's like, Joseph Smith. And I was like, oh, no, he is.
That's funny. I still love Dalinar, though.
I do, too.
Dalinar is tied as my favorite character in Stormlight, and I'm worried that one of my favorites is gonna fight it. So it's gonna be somebody. If I had to put money down, Dalinar would be at the top of that list. Vote Dalinar too. I am most worried though about sweet golden retriever Adolin Colin. Like I am so worried about Adolin.
You're gonna like the pieces you get with him here.
I have loved them so far.
Well, they get way better.
Yeah, I love him very, very, very much. So in terms of where my heart is most concerned of breaking, it's Adolin.
Wait, Sam M just said, "Who is Joseph Smith? Would you like to do this?"
By all means, Jimmy, go ahead.
So Joseph Smith was the prophet in the Mormon church. He's kind of like the man of the Mormon church.
Prophet. Yes.
Because he received some tablets and then he was able to translate them. And he found out that Jesus had actually been in the United States of America and the Native Americans were Jews. I mean, where do you want me to go with this? Nebraska was very important at this point. And Joseph Smith was supposed to found a city, and this kept moving because some people didn't want the Mormons there. And eventually he was actually executed, making him a martyr, which is probably why Mormonism ended up sticking around for so very long. That's a very abbreviated. You should really read about it, though. It's fascinating.
It is, yeah.
Had a checkered
Mormon's
past.
an interesting read, too.
Book of Mormon is worth, if you can get it used, yeah.
Have you been able to get it? I know you were looking for it at one point.
Yeah, I ordered it used, yeah.
Yeah. Have you looked at the Bible, too, that I told you to buy?
I have it. No, I have it.
Have you looked through it, though?
Yeah, I've been reading Judges again. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I love the footnotes. Guys, footnotes in a Bible. It's really exciting. The Oxford Study Bible. I'm very, very, very big fan.
Someone said you could see the play. So the play actually doesn't really go through a ton of the history of the Mormonism.
No, not so much, but it is great.
The South Park episode of Mormonism actually does represent it in a very like comedic way, but it does have a lot of the history in it. But I would also I would implore you to go check out like real historical sources. Like it's fascinating to read about. I mean, millions of people believe this, so you should understand. And hey, and you know, as much as I like poking fun at Mormonism, like some of the people I love in my life are Mormon. So I would like,
friends that are Mormon.
Yeah, I would love to know what they believe. You know, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. So you should go check it out.
No, absolutely not. Under the Banner of Heaven is a good representation of that too. But yeah, the Mormon Church has multiple sources. So whereas like most Christian denominations primarily just use the Bible, Mormonism uses the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Pearl of Great Price, Doctrine and Covenants, and I think there's like Words of Wisdom, I think is another, and I might be missing another one, but so is Gavilar, Joseph Smith or Dalinar. I would go with Gavilar personally.
There might be a little bit of a split, but I mean, Dalinar is being told these things and he's being considered crazy. I mean, it does fit. It does
fit. Now that you've said it, it does fit. It fits very well.
I mean, the Cosmere is very close to some of the Mormon mythology.
Influenced. Yeah, which I've had an interesting time while reading the Cosmere, looking for, I guess, the little Easter eggs that he kind of puts in with certain books and things. And I feel like certain ones are much more apparent if you are familiar with the faith, and other times you have to dig a little bit deeper. But I do like that part. For me, I find it a fun part of my reading.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think all of it's fascinating, to be honest with you. Belltube says, if Dalinar goes to Orlando, we love you.
Yes, we will sure know. Words of Radiance is I would take it, but
Honor's dead. We'll see what we can do.
We'll see what we can do. Oh, still one of the best lines.
Banger.
It's such a good
line. Listen, Brando Sando every now and then can pull it out like nobody else.
He can. Yep. So you and I were supposed to go to Dragonsteel.
And then we went to Europe instead.
And then we both went to Europe instead.
Way better.
I went to the colonizer and you went to the colonized, in that I went to England and you went to
Brits Ireland. Are at it again. That's what I learned when I went to Ireland. The Brits are at it again.
They sure are. So are you sad that you didn't go to Dragonsteel? Yeah, honestly, I'm sad I didn't get to see the people there because I feel like that would be really fun.
That'd have been really great. Yeah.
Looking at all the activities, I was saying to Josh, I was like, first of all, Josh would have hated this, like absolutely hated it. I was like, he's read 2 Brandon Sanderson books and they were middling for him at best. I was like, this would not have been a fun experience for you. But it just, I don't think it would have been what I was hoping it to be.
I feel like I would have been a downer and I wouldn't want to be a downer. You know what I mean? Like I love that people are super into it. And like for some people, Sanderson has been that guy, you know, and I think that that's great. And I wouldn't want to be there being like, hey guys, like this is fine. This is fine. Like that would, I genuinely like, don't ever want to be that guy.
Yeah.
I like seeing people come together though, like seeing people that we know there and connecting.
Mm-hmm.
I think that because I've had that happen all year for me. I think it's a beautiful thing. So I would have liked to have seen those people.
Yeah.
But maybe I would have rather just seen them at something else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that this isn't to say that I haven't been super excited about When in Truth. I was going around the local bookstores trying to bribe them with overpaying for the book.
I heard.
Yeah, I really was. I was a legit. You can ask Kelsey. Like I was putting people in very awkward positions, which I still don't understand why the one local bookstore didn't just give it
to you. Yeah,
I offered them a lot of money. Like I was like,
which bookstore?
I don't want to say it because people would dox me, which would be bad.
Okay, I'll ask you after when we're.
I don't know if you've ever heard of it because it's actually brand new. But the idea was, I was like, hey, what if I give you a couple $100 to get this 2 days early?
Wow.
And they're like, but the publisher would be mad if we gave it too early. I'm like, just take a picture of the barcode and scan it on Friday. Not rocket science. Like you get to pocket a large amount of profit from this book, like way over what it would be worth. And honestly, it was dumb of me. I'm kind of glad that they said no.
Yeah.
And then I just went to Target, ended up finding it on a Thursday, and the dude was awesome about it.
I heard, and that's when the first page of Hackatar was read.
the first chapter. Well, I think I read everything except for the last page of the chapter. To be fair,
so it was the first chapter. Okay, I thought it was the first page.
I read. I think I was on the last page of it whenever he came back out. And once I had the book, I'd been there for 45 minutes. I was like, I do not want to be in Target. I want to leave. Man, like to all this to say, like I might sound like a Sanderson here. I'm actually not. When in truth, I'm having a great time with it. Even I have complaints. I could sit here and. It's
we were talking about it before this started.
It's fun to complain, and there's some stuff that I find like objectively for myself. It's not objective. I find to be like heinous that I don't love, but there's also pieces of Winds of Truth that have gotten me like so excited. High. Yeah. Like I'm very much in. So Tom Orange went to the World Deadlift Championship.
No one is surprised by this if they know you, Tom. No one.
Tom, go have a protein shake and eat a like a PB&J. I don't know what are you guys? I don't know what.
Tom and I ended up connecting last year because he and I both took the year of Sanderson to the literal amount.
Yeah, you guys went ham.
We were like, challenge accepted, sir. And we read the Cosmere in the whole year. And I was like, you are the only other insane person that I have found thus far that has done this year. So you and I are going to talk about it. And that's when I learned that Tom was like, I like the gym more than I like books. And I was like, that's the thing? Cool. Like, good for you. And then when you guys became Jim Orange and Tom Orange, got to relive it.
That was one of my better performance. It makes it good. Listen, there's been a couple episodes. They all do about, average is like anywhere between 2,800, 3,800 views. I don't pay attention a ton to views, but I can tell when something does really well. The fact that me and Tom Orange, that episode was absolutely ridiculous.
It was
and
fun.
Also the Toasty Towns episode, very much like how those don't have 10,000 plus. I don't understand it. Some of my best work. Like Tom was such a good guest. And Tom, as the episode went on, opened up more and more and more.
He does. He takes a little while and then he gets comfortable. Tom, we're talking about you as if you're like not here, even though you're in the chat. But I feel like I love Tom too. Tom is great. So yeah.
Man, Tom, we should curl together sometime. We should go to the gym sometime, bro.
There you go.
Okay.
Plans being made. It's perfect.
We should do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've been super excited for When in Truth. And honestly, I'm just having a lot of fun. I kind of told Kelsey, like, I don't know if this is a series that I would be super excited about rereading every single time. But for me, I definitely feel like I am all in on what happens next. I was basically saying like being spoiled would be like
upsetting.
The worst. Yeah.
I hear you. No, you've got plans. There you go.
Beautiful.
It was funny because Gavin, when he and I were chatting before I went live with him a couple of weeks ago, he was saying, he's like, I'm going to be on Chatting with Nuts in a couple of weeks. I was like, that's exciting. And I was like, if you want to see me at my most awkward, go watch me on Chatting with Nuts. I was so nervous coming on.
Really?
I was so nervous. And also I had like the world's worst migraine and had taken migraine medication before the show. So my face, like I've got a pretty solid RBF, like to begin with. And I feel like my face during so much of that chat, I look like I'm so angry at someone and I'm monotone a lot of the time. I was so nervous. And I was like, Gavin, it will not be anything as bad as that.
I don't remember you. So I've had guests that I've had to like really work at. I did not feel that way with you. That's very interesting.
Good. But yeah, I felt very, very nervous.
Have we met in person yet?
No, we had not.
Because we met in person twice. Yes. So yeah. So we had not at that point.
No.
Okay.
No, that was our first time really chatting because we had exchanged a few messages on Instagram at first and then Discord because I was like, he doesn't use Instagram.
I have 900 followers, never posted a thing.
Never posted a thing, which I love. So I think that's incredible. But it was our first time really chatting. And I don't think at that point I had been on another live. I think that might have been my first one on someone else's channel. I might have done no, I did the Augustus one, but I think that might have been still on my channel.
I think you were under 1,000 subs at that point because I don't really look at subs when I invite people on. I just invite people on that I think that like I could connect with. Like I told Gavin, like the first hour is easy. Mm-hmm. The second hour, or the half hour after, comes from me having like a personal interest in the person.
Sure.
And so I don't really look at that, but I think I looked at it like right before. And I think at that point I was actually shocked. Like I was like, oh, okay. Like I
You're slow going.
Well, no, just the way that you talk and stuff. I was like, oh, this is like easily like a 6,000-7,000 sub channel, easily,
Still nowhere near there. But no, because I was still under 1,000 when we went to lunch. Because I remember I said to you, I was like, I'm so close. And I was like, I normally don't care, but because it's like 997,
you gotta get it.
I was like, I care so much because it's not even. I just wanted to be there. And at that point too, because of all the live streams that I had done, the requirements for monetization for the channel were so far surpassed that I was like, this would just be nice. Like this would be a nice little
because once it's done, it's done.
It is. And I was like, I would really like to just get to that point. But no, I hadn't really done many lives up until that point. I had done the Augustus chat with Alan and Joanna, and I can't remember if I had done why.
I remember that chat
with Joanna
with the 1,000-yard stare. And I was like, I feel for you, girl, because I'd be the same way. I'd be that same person. You guys were like, oh, but Odysseus, I don't know any of the names. They're like, Odysseus is not the emperor that we once thought he was, and Marcus Aurelius. And Joanna's just like,
Marcus Aurelius.
I like John Williams. And I'm like, hey.
I love Joanna in that chat so much. I love Joanna all the time, but in that chat especially, because I remember I said to her, I was like, hey, do you want to join us for this conversation? Because she and Alan, that was the first time I had found Alan's channel, was him talking about Augustus. So
really?
And I was like, I should read this book.
Whoa.
And I saw the like his little intro or whatever, and he was really gushing about it. And I was like, I'm gonna turn it off here. So because I never watch reviews of books before I read them, even if they're non-spoiler. Like I just was interested in Alan's channel because I thought the name of the channel was 10 out of 10 perfect. For a classics nerd, I was like, excellent, I'm here. So that convinced me to read it. And at that point, I was already chatting a little bit with Joanna, and she said she loved Augustus. So then I messaged Alan saying, I read the book, I'm obsessed with it, and we should have a chat about it. And he was like, you should invite Joanna. And I was like, sure. So I said to Joanna, I was like, do you want to come chat with us about this? Like, heads up, I'm going to be like probably really excited to talk about it and getting into the history about it. She was like, yeah, I'm like, I don't know what I can offer, but I'm happy to come chat with you. I was like, you will offer so much. Like your presence will offer so much. I'm so excited to talk to the two of you. And then at one point during the live, I was like, I'm so sorry.
I watched it. I remember watching it and just being like, yeah, there goes the Roman history people. They're doing their thing. And
yeah.
Joanna was a pleasant spectator.
Yeah, my whole love bomb with Alan ended up becoming a dissection of the Roman Empire anyway. So, I mean, like, pretty much if Alan and I start talking, that's essentially what happens. But,
hey, the fact that you got Alan on a live stream and to respond to your messages is already kind of a feat.
Well, here's a funny story about that, because Alan was on a live at one point, and I had sent him messages in Discord 3 months earlier. Okay. And he opened a tab where you saw his Discord messages, and I was like, Alan, my notification is right there at the top. I was like, that's from 3 months ago.
that is how behind he is.
Yeah. But now he's a bit better. I realize now if I want a response, I have to message him like 12 times and then I get an answer. So it's good.
He's got a lot going on. He's got a lot.
And honestly, like, I'm not messaging him with important things. It's usually memes about the Roman Empire. So it's not.
Would you say that you think about the Roman Empire daily?
Every day.
Okay.
Every day.
Thank God.
Every single day. And
what would we do if men didn't do that?
I mean, and women, clearly. It's just, that's what it is. But also, I have a ton of Roman history books in my library that I walk by every day. So I'm forced to think about it.
What's your favorite one?
I pretty much anything by Mary Beard. I'm looking at it right now.
Did Mary Beard have a beard? Like, do we know this?
No, she did not.
She probably heard that before, huh?
Yeah, it would have been good, but no.
I have a pass because I have a terrible last name. So, like, I can
make those kind of jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's incredible, though, honestly. So pretty much anything she writes. But she wrote one book about the Roman triumph that I am personally quite fond of.
I remember being in a used bookstore here, and I found it was like a really big, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like a big collector's edition of one of the most dense Roman Empire series.
Was it the rise and fall of the Roman Empire?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I remember sending a picture to Alan because it was like Easton Press or something.
Yeah.
And it was for a pretty good deal. I'd been at the bookstore for a very long time, and the guy had put it on sale. And I was like, I'd love to know more about the Roman Empire. I've always been interested in it. I said to Alan, he goes, for the love of God, like, do not buy that. No, like, it is considered the most dense, difficult, dry. Like, it's probably the best, but it is so, like, you won't like it. Like, there's no way.
Not at all.
And I didn't buy it. I did not buy it. But then when I researched, Mary Beard was at the top of the list.
She is the most accessible, I think. She really writes for the average person. I feel like she's not writing for academics and scholars. I feel like some of the books are when they get to be hyper specialized, but on average, I feel anyone who is a reader could pick up one of her books and feel immersed and understand what's going on. So yeah, she's the best.
Yeah, I've seen her at the top of like every single list. Matt said it'll look good on shelf. Yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. That's mainly why I wanted it. And I was like, if I can justify this, and I was like, Alan would know. And he was like, do not. Like, buyer beware. You'll never finish it. Many people think it's like one of the most challenging reads.
I won't ever read it. I have read excerpts from it, and I'm like, and that's enough.
Dang.
Like, yeah, I have zero desire to ever.
Well, it's been around so long that like people have probably taken the relevant information from it and like made it in more digestible. Like, it's obviously a source for a lot of people, so you probably don't need to read it, right? Like, like many people are not going to read the Dead Sea Scrolls. Like, they're just going to read John and be like, yeah, that's fine.
I've read them, but yes, not the average person.
Yeah, average person, yes. I mean, well, I won't go there.
I found the Dead Sea Scrolls, a very nice book on them, for like $2 at a book sale, and was very excited. It's a beautiful book. It's this gorgeous hardcover.
Was it first edition? Were they the Dead Sea Scrolls?
Right? I would love that. It's this papyrus that's falling apart in my house, but sadly no.
That'd be excellent.
I think it would be pretty great, but yeah, we've really run the gamut of some topics tonight.
We could easily do a 3-hour Bible podcast.
Oh, I told you whenever you feel ready to do that religion podcast.
Well, there's some certain parameters that have to be met before I can do this.
I know there are, so we're just waiting for
very
like
morbid.
30 years.
Oh, no. It won't be that long.
It won't be that long. I mean, we'll get there eventually. But it'll be fine. Yeah. So I know this was so Simon, and I'm so sorry. He wanted to know how far you were into Wind and Truth.
I am starting day 5. I just finished day 4. Now, before anyone thinks I'm crazy, I actually did participate in the preview chapters. So I was already 320 pages into the book when I picked it up from Target on Thursday. And actually, when I opened it, I was like, oh my God, I still have like 1,000 pages to go. That's insane.
Yep.
Like, that's actually crazy. So I think it's like 500 something pages in, maybe 520 or 530 pages in. I just finished the interludes after day 4. And I'll be honest. So day 1, I told this Laura, I think day 1's terrible. Like, I think it's actually maybe the worst Sanderson I've ever read. I really hated day 1. I know people are gonna. So, all right, you know what? I need to qualify that a little bit. There was still things in day 1 that I found interesting that I wanted to comment on.
Adolin.
But by a general read, well, the prologue also was I thought the
prologue was really good.
Super cool.
Prologue was really good.
First set of interludes started to change my opinion of the book, but there's just 2 or 3 chapters in day 1 that I thought were just miserable. I mean, I really hated what was happening. I didn't like the writing of it either, but day 2 starts to turn the tide. And day 2 has a great chapter, or a couple great chapters maybe, and then it's good. It's good. You're like, okay, I'll hang on. Day 3 and 4, I have loved. I actually have loved it. Minus a couple little things, that I could nitpick about, but I'm not going to. Like, I know what I'm getting into at this point with Sanderson. So I'm 500 something pages, and I'm having a very good time. I want to know what happens next. And maybe that's all this will be for me, but regardless, the lore is so cool. There's already been some twists that I thought were
a lot of lore.
A lot of lore, and it's good stuff. I like it a lot. You know what I was thinking about? Like, if I had to, I see some booktubers do this sometimes. Like, what authors have you read the most from? And Sanderson would actually, like, for someone who's like very middle of the road on Sanderson, I usually I usually love some, hate some. It's kind of where I'm at. It is wild to me that
How much you read? Yeah.
I mean, he might be in the top 5 or top 3.
I mean, that's not surprising. You do have a podcast about one of his series. So
that is true. I do that. But hey, that's only 5 books now, right?
It
With
is,
2 novellas.
They're also very long books.
They're very, very long. They're very long books. I think, like, if I had to go by individual books read, I mean, I think it'd probably be like Cormac, Sanderson, King. I mean, Hobb would be in there because Realm of the Elderlings 16 books.
Yeah, it's long.
So hard to beat that.
Sanderson's definitely up there for me in terms of authors I read the most of, for sure. Just at the sheer scope of the amount of books he has.
Which is ironic because, like, I'm not the biggest Sanderson fan, but I think I do
find that so funny for you. Like, I really do find that so interesting.
Listen, I've been saying this for years. I desperately want to be a Sandersonian. Like, I would love.
I know you do.
Nothing more than to, like, I never go into the book being like, I can't wait to hate on this because it's going to be so cool with me. I'm always like, please, God, give me Warbreaker again. Give me in Mistborn, I have plenty of complaints about.
Warbreaker, I love so much.
I reread Warbreaker this past year, actually, because we did it right before we finished Way of Kings and Lost in Roshar, and before we went to Words of Radiance, we said, let's just do like 3 or 4
Makes
episodes.
Sense to do Warbreaker, yeah.
And minus a couple things that bother me that are like really they're prevalent through all of his works, which is like the servant class always being the people who are actually the evil. Like, I can't stand that. It bothers me. Genuinely bothers me. But Warbreaker is a good fantasy book. I really like it. Maybe it's not the best ever, but there are some things. The magic is cool, and I know people throw a fit about hard magic, so I don't care.
Okay. I thought that, as long as it's done well.
It's interesting. I think he has some really interesting characters, takes on gods, which are cool.
Yes.
There's some stuff I'm not huge on, but overall, what a good book. Like,
I love the characters in that book. Lightsong is my favorite Cosmere character.
Lightsong's fantastic.
He's great. And I mean, like, in terms of this, I think the reason it works so well for me, kind of fits into our greater narrative of this evening, is that in terms of religion, I would say it's directly the most heavy-handed religious book in the Cosmere. I mean, like, Stormlight's got a lot of religion going on, but it's over the course of a series.
Well,
whereas I feel like in one single book, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, okay, single book, yes. I agree with that. Mistborn's
got a ton, but it's over 3 books.
There's some stone tablets in there. There's
lots of books. lots of books. There's a lot of things happening.
There's a lot in Mistborn, but yeah, you're right.
But in terms of a singular book, I think the concept of the returned is so fascinating, and you have a god who doesn't feel that they're worthy, which I think is cool. Great. It's so great. And I love that. And also we get Nightblood in Basher.
I mean, Nightblood and Basher are sick. I mean, Viviana is like
she's fine. I didn't like her when I read it initially, but also I will give Sanderson credit that she is a character that I changed my mind on the latter half of the book. I was like, I hated her for the first half of the book.
She's definitely better by the end.
Yes. I mean, still not anywhere near my top characters at all. But it was an interesting journey that we took to get there with her. But overall, I love the character work that happens in Warbreaker. For me, it's a very enjoyable read.
So. I think it's a really good standalone. There are things about it I don't like, but like overall, I mean, very creative, which is great. And I think it is satisfying as a standalone, even though he's supposedly going to write Warbreaker 2, which, you know, hey.
I don't think we need it, honestly. Like, I really don't think we need it. I think it's fine.
He's the man with the plan. He's got it all figured out.
What he says. It's what he says. But I mean, you know, Simon also says Elantris has a really interesting take on religion and followed that up with Rathan is a great character. Rathan is one of my favorite characters in the whole Cosmere. I think he's incredible.
So I started Elantris. I read 250 pages and DNF'd it because I thought, but I will say this. I'm going to actually finish it. And a lot of people said, oh, do it before Wind and Truth. That was never going to happen. But Elantris, pound for pound, has the coolest setting and premise of any of his books, actually.
Agreed. I completely agree.
I just didn't like a lot of the writing. I thought the writing was a little bit hokey, which he talks about. That's fine. And that's fine. I will definitely finish that book. It was at a time, like, I think I picked it up on a whim. And when I pick something up on a whim that's not planned, or like I know I should be reading, it's got to be like a banger, because like I have other things I need to be reading. This happened with 100%. This happened with 1Q84 by Murakami, which I actually think is so far, I'm about halfway through, probably his best book that I've read, and I love it. But it started to drag a little bit, and I was like, I'm not supposed to be reading this. Like, I got other things to read. So I put that on the back burner for like 6 months. And same thing with Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. So Elantris is on the DNF, but I will finish again.
Return. Yeah.
But easily his best setting, best premise.
I agree. I was telling you when I was reading the Warlord Chronicles, which, like, incredible.
Oh, did you like those?
Yeah. Just a little.
Just a smidge.
Just a smidge. Okay. Only one of my top reads of all time. When they go to the Island of the Dead, I was like, this is Elantris. Like, I was so convinced that Sanderson pulled that and basically made a world of it, which I thought was really, really cool. But
oh my God, dude, Warlord. So the one thing I remember from Warlord is the Isle of what's the Isle of Death or what?
Isle of the Dead,
yeah. So that in the audiobook, I remember I was in the squat rack. Specifically, I remember I was in the squat rack. I racked my weight, and there's a quick what is her name? Numi or Nimue.
Yeah.
There's like a flip in the character. I don't know.
Oh, yes, there is.
Scared the shit out of me. Like, out of more than any other book I've ever read, horror or not, scared the living Jesus out of me. I was flabbergasted. I remember like jumping in the gym. I was like, this is ridiculous. It's like 9 a.m. I'm like, what am I doing? That is to this day one of the most like evocative scenes I've ever read.
Good.
Yeah, I really love that trilogy.
Me too. Oh man, Josh and I were talking about it the other day, in the sense that I was like, I've had a lot of really good reads this year, and narrowing it down to a top 5 for the end of the year is like freaking impossible. But Enemy of God is without a doubt in that top 5.
Yeah, Enemy of God is probably my favorite from that. For me, my right now, it's like there's a very big gap between like 2 and 3. And then 1 and 2 are like
interesting,
which I can kind of say because I'm not doing a top 10. It's Cloud Atlas and Remains of the Day. I mean, two all-timers. Like, it's not. And now I do know I've read some other stuff that I always forget things that I've read. But for me, it's like those two are just at neck and neck, and then everything from 2 up, I don't know how I'm like. I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard when you've read a lot of really great books. And I mean, part of it too, I was thinking, if you hear my cats growling, don't be surprised. One of them's in a mood. But apparently he doesn't like Warlord Chronicles as much as I do.
That's fair.
But so many of the books too are completely varied in their genre. And I was like, they're not really comparable. Like it's hard to equate a value to them and compare them when like you get entirely different things out of that reading experience. And like you go to books for different things at different times when you need them. And it's hard to narrow that down when you're factoring in all that stuff too.
Yeah, I don't even believe in like a hierarchy of genre, right? I just believe that you go to different things for different feelings. However, and this is what Tad Williams said to me, and I believe him, I think that the top 1% of any genre of anything are all comparable because they transcend whatever they're in and they become something way more than that. And that's kind of like what art does, right? And so like you could read a comedy that could transcend that, and it is in that 1% echelon that can compare to something like an Anna Karenina or whatever. And I've always been a big believer of that. But this year, I feel like I read 2 books that are so absurdly good this year, right? Like it Remains of the Day and Cloud Atlas. And if I was having to compare those to, like, for instance, A Storm of Swords or The Scar by China Miéville, that would, or Kindred by Octavia Butler, that would start getting a lot more difficult. But I've just gotten through a lot of that top 1% catalog. Now there's still stuff to be found, but in the fantasy realm, I've done a lot of that top 1%.
I get that. And I'm starting to wonder if I'm going to hit that next year, because I feel like I had so many good reads for me this year, and I'm like and I don't count rereads as part of that for like my top books of the year. So I was like, I finished all of First Law this year, which was incredible. Had a really good time with that. I have done my Romantasy journey this year, which will continue because I've had a great time with it. But I, read Warlord, which was like a life-changing experience. I read Bone Clocks this year. Like I've had a lot of really good reads. And the thing that I was realizing when I was making my list, I was like, they're all character driven for me. I was like, it's all character stuff. And, regardless of genre, like if we're looking at that all comparable top 1%, for me, it comes down to character work in all of my top books. So that's really what I've learned about myself, I feel like, as a reader this year, which has been an interesting takeaway, because I kind of had a feeling that's where I was going with my reads. It's that I can love a story, but I really have to have that connection to the characters and the character work for it to stick with me in that type of way.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, so for me, I love a good character story, don't get me wrong. But lately, I've been wanting a bit of that plot. And by the way, I do think you can have a super forward propelling plot with great characters. I think Aversion, so I talked about this on channel, Aversion by Alistair Reynolds, one of my favorite sci-fi books of all time. Like I just read it. I read it in 2 days. It was so damn good.
I love that.
The plot never stopped. A little bit of repetition, but that is intentional. The characters I thought were really great. Actually, I thought they were very distinct from one another, which was great. But lately, I have really been into the plot, and a book that I've been dying to read, and I need to make time for it, is The Tainted Cup.
I've been seeing this, and I also want to read it.
I've heard it's super plot driven. Someone compared it to Attack on Titan, which I don't know if you know this, but I think Attack on Titan, the first half, before the big twist, I think is the best plotted series I've ever read.
Yeah, I know you are a big fan of the first half.
Oh, dude, the first half of it. Honestly, you should read it. It's insane.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so good. But when someone compared it to Attack on Titan, I was like,
I'm interested.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Man, so lately I've kind of in on the plot stuff, but it's whenever like characters are just stand-ins for tropes that I have a problem with. Now,
I agree. I don't like that.
Listen to the words I'm saying. I'm not offended by tropes. I love tropes. Tropes are necessary. You can call anything a trope. It doesn't really mean a lot. However, for instance, Mike Shackle had a character that was a coward. And I felt like it was like, I'm telling the coward story. And it's just like, that was it. So for instance, there's a person and they're a coward, and then someone's like, oh, well, you don't have to be a coward because I have this magical sword that will make sure you never die. And then they use a sword. It turns out that the sword wasn't magical. It was just iron.
It was a lie. Shocking.
I've had food poisoning more complex than that. I just, to me, it's just like,
yeah.
Okay, dude. Like, if this is the first time I'd seen it, sure. This is not. And to be fair, like, you become, I don't want to say jaded, but you become seasoned. You become seasoned.
I would
as
say
a reader.
yes. Seasoned might be a more friendly term. Yes.
I've seen this before. That's all I'm saying. I've seen it done better. You know, that's the kind of thing. And that was just one of those times. You know, if that had been one of the first fantasy trilogies I read, I probably wouldn't have felt that way. Not even, by the way, like, being a coward is not a fantasy trope.
No,
it is a trope.
Yeah.
It's a trope. So for me, I think that if they can avoid those things where I'm like, I know exactly where this character is headed,
right,
that goes a long way with me.
That's fair. That's totally fair. And I'm pretty much in the same boat as that. What was interesting for me this year was, like I said, I finished First Law. And last time I had you on, I had read the First Law trilogy. And I think I had finished Best Served Cold. But that was as far as I had read.
Yeah, you were in the standalones. I think you had read the Heroes, actually.
I might have read the Heroes, which is
because you loved it. You had read the Heroes.
Yeah, I love the Heroes. And everyone kept telling me, they're like, Age of Madness, so much better than First Law. Like, settle in. And I was like, okay. And I got to it and I was like, sorry, I prefer First Law. And that is my hot take from the year. And the reason I think this is that it's interesting in terms of, we're going back to our conversation on writing, right? Like, discovery writing versus gardeners versus architects, if we want to quote Mr. George R. R. Martin. Yes. And Abercrombie is very much a gardener in First Law, and he is an architect in Age of Madness, which is interesting that the same author does both within.
Yeah, because I think but here's the thing, he took feedback from reviews.
He did. And for me, I didn't mind that the story was more mapped out, because that was fine. But I didn't connect to the characters as much in Age of Madness as I did in First Law. Because in First Law, I enjoyed every single POV. Like, I know a lot of people like to hate on Pharaoh. I love that Pharaoh is.
I had no problem with her. Yeah. I mean, she is what she is.
She is. And that's it. And that for me was fine. Like, would I have liked a bit more depth to her character? Sure. Is she meant to be that way? No. And that was fine with me. And I mean, when I got to Age of Madness, I really enjoyed a group of the POVs. There were a couple POVs that I was like, why are you a POV? And why am I feeling like this, Joe?
Broad.
Correct. Yeah. I was like, I could do without this forever.
That's a really popular take,
it is I think it's a pretty common feeling, but like, Orso is one of my top fantasy characters of all time. You know,
Orso and Leo.
Leo is a whole thing that we
Savine.
I enjoy Savine. I enjoy her. She is not my favorite of the female POVs, though, that we get in Age of Madness.
Do you like Ricky?
I like Rika, yeah. Or Riki, or whatever you want to call her. But I enjoyed her POV because we get a certain other character with her that I very much enjoy. Mm-hmm. But I found that to be really interesting. And that was also one of my takeaways from this year, that I was like, okay, like, character-driven stuff really does matter to me. Even if, like, I am interested in the plot, if I'm not connecting with those characters, like, it's going to be a harder sell.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, but you still enjoyed Age of Madness.
I loved it.
I thought the ending was tremendous.
Fantastic ending. I thought the third book was the best book of the trilogy, which I think is also an unpopular opinion. So, yeah.
It's usually people are back and forth between books 2 and 3. I have seen people love book 1. For me, book 2 is my favorite, I think.
That's fair.
Because of just some of the Orso stuff is really good. But then, like, the Orso stuff doesn't get any worse in the third. It gets better.
It gets better. That's the thing. Orso is just so good. He's a fine wine. Orso is a fine wine. Oh my God, I loved him. But yeah, so I mean, I read some really good books this year, you know, and I met some really good characters this year. I met Crispin Hershey and Orso in the same year.
Hey, those are two. That's a really interesting pair, isn't
right?
it?
Oh my God. Could you imagine those two in a room together?
I do love Orso. First Law is one of those series that I almost think I've underrated after time because I haven't talked about a lot on the channel and I don't talk about it a lot. But like when I was going through that in many ways saved fantasy for me. I think I've told the story maybe once before, but I started the channel. I read Rage of Dragons. I read a couple things and I was really into it. And then I started reading Wheel of Time and I really liked the first 3 books a lot. Like I actually unapologetically still love book 2 and 3. And then I did not love book 4 of Wheel of Time. And then I detested book 5. And I kind of DNF'd it. And I remember so many people being like, well, you just don't like fantasy.
Yeah.
But I was still kind of naive and also very insecure being on the internet and on a camera. And I remember just being like, maybe I don't like fantasy. And I was like, what a bummer. Because like that was what motivated me to read.
Sure.
And I remember being like, well, I know First Law, everyone says to read it if you like A Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
I had already adjusted my expectations though.
Yeah.
I was like, it's not going to be like A Song of Ice and Fire, right?
Sure.
So I read it and I was like, this is exactly what I want. Yes. And then followed that up with Dagger and the Coin, which was insane. I loved it so very much.
I still need to read that. It's on my list.
Oh, Getter, top 5 antagonist. In Dagger and the Coin. I think it's a great series. I think there's some things that I wish were a little bit different. I'm not gonna say they're bad, but I wish they were a little bit different. But the characters and
so good.
Yeah, it's really great. I think Kithrin's also one of the cooler antagonists that I've read. You know, being a prodigy in banking is not something you see all the time, and she's also a kind of an unspoken alcoholic, I think. I think the series highlights that, but I got the feeling that she had a problem with alcohol throughout the series, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But anyways, First Law is so pivotal in me still reading fantasy, but also having a channel. And I just didn't make a lot of videos because I felt like everyone says the same shit about First Law. It's like, okay, characters are great. Oh my gosh, they're all so bad, but I love, everyone's, and that's fine. I love that. I love hearing it. And I love watching people talk about First Law, but I didn't feel like I had anything to say about it. So I never, But First Law, I mean, I think Joe Abercrombie's ability to write like Joe Abercrombie, like he does his own thing, like nobody else writes like him.
Yes.
I think that is so important. It's one of the things I really admire about Dungeon Crawler Carl, even though it's not like my favorite book of all time. The fact that he found a voice and ran with it and did it.
Yeah.
Maybe maybe a little too much into the ground. But I think that's like a really special thing that I wish more authors did. And Joe Abercrombie is without a doubt one of the best.
Unique voice.
This is the thing, and I know you're a big fan of this. Like, you gotta listen to Stephen Pacey, but I find Joe Abercrombie's writing to be extremely enjoyable to read physically. Like eyeballing him,
they're both great. Yeah, they're both.
But then
great.
When you hear Stephen Pacey,
it just brings it to a different.
When he does the Gorse voice, it's a wrap. Like that's the goat.
It is the goat. Oh my God, Gorse voice.
It's so
Gorse
good.
voice and Glocta's lisp are the two greatest things that have ever been put to record in audiobook narration, in my opinion.
It's so good.
And that's the thing. I did the first 2 books of First Law physically, and then I jumped into Last Argument of Kings in audiobook. And I had very preconceived ideas in my head as to what these characters sounded like after 2 lengthy books, and then heard the lisp of Glocta and was like, why didn't I think to give him a lisp? And
so, I'm the same way. I didn't listen to Pacey, I think, to Heroes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'm the same. I had already had all this stuff, and he just completely blew me away, which I thought was great. By the way, I gotta just laugh. Belltube said, I've dated Judge, which is
I saw that. Hilarious. And the thing that I'm questioning, Brian, is Brian has said many times that my voice sounds just like his ex-girlfriend. So I'm hoping that that's not the case, that I sound like this Judge person, but maybe we'll find out in
no, not that
ex. Okay, thank goodness.
Confirmed. Brian has dated multiple women.
Confirmed. We're very happy for Brian, but Sam is curious. Which book do you think align with your taste the most? Is there someone? Because for me, I'm not sure there is anymore.
So I think the best way, I'm going to think about this a little bit more, but just right off the off the cuff response is it would be the person who recommends something that I feel like I need to try, and that would be better than food.
Okay.
That would probably be the guy that I think of immediately, but let me think about this a little bit. Like, who's the closest to me?
Definitely Alan, for sure. For sure, Alan.
for you, maybe, because you like Augustus, you like Warlord. Like, I could see that.
Alan and I have those two in common. And I feel like beyond that, there's not a crazy amount of overlap. That's the thing. Like, I've been thinking about this at length lately in terms of the labels that we like to give ourselves on BookTube and how I hate them. My God, my cats are insane.
They love the labels.
Love the labels. But I was thinking about doing a video just titling it, Why Can't I Be Both? In that I love epic fantasy. I'm super excited for Stormlight, but I also love ACOTAR. Like, I feel like it's one of those things that I am being very limited in what I am allowed to like in people's perspectives of me. And I don't see a lot of people maybe owning up to that they love both anymore, because they feel like they have to appease either the algorithm or the people that follow them. But like, it's just, there's not many people I feel like at this point that are doing a very rounded, like, I read all fantasy or I read all genres anymore, because I feel like it's been labeled into very specific things. So
I mean, I agree with you. I mean, that's kind of what we talked about earlier, right? It's like the Fantasy Nuttwork, but you're going to hear me talk about Ishiguro a lot. And that's just part of the package deal that you get with me. You know, I bundle it in. It's like the free antivirus when you buy a laptop. Like, I don't really want WebRoot, but you're going to give it to me for 6 months. I guess I'll take it.
And then you can decide if you want to re-up.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because, like, I have a Discord that's part of my Patreon because I don't have anything to give people. So I was like, well, this is the only way I would run a server, because I would never run a public server because that's way too much stress.
Yeah.
But it's ironic, or not ironic, but it's interesting because there's so many different people in there that have different, like, some people have come to me from One Piece. Some people have come to me from Stoner Review. Some people have come to me from Malazan and whatever, right?
Mixing of mixes,
But what's beautiful about that is, like, so many people have picked up books. Like, the Library Ladder has been discussing hot girl fiction with people. Like that's the kind of stuff that makes me happy. Like, that's all I really want, is to open up people's minds to, like, trying other things. And I wouldn't say don't feel limited. Just do what you do, and do what you love. And
that's kind of what I've been doing this year. And I was just like, you know what, this is what I need right now. And I feel like that's more what I've been leaning into. Is I felt like when I started the channel initially, it was very much, I want to be taken seriously, especially as a woman on the platform. I want to be seen that I read epic fantasy. And yes, we need richer reviews of ACOTAR.
The wingspan was tremendous.
And one was bigger than the other. We'll get to that in book 2.
Size does matter.
It definitely does. But, I just feel like it was one of those things where I desperately wanted to be taken seriously. And I feel like that might have been an overarching thing from academia, where being a woman in a predominantly male-dominated field, I was like, I need to look like I align with what this preference is, and that is epic fantasy. It's not romantasy at all. So I mean, that, as you know, like, last time you were on here and we talked about it, I was panning Fourth Wing, and I was like, that's not real fantasy. And lo and behold, it only became part of my personality this year. But
what shows we shouldn't damage genre because of one bad experience.
Well, I ended up loving Fourth Wing. I hadn't even read it yet. That was the whole thing.
So you really ate crow. Okay. You really ate it.
I even made a video later titling, I was wrong about Fourth Wing.
Take it as someone who's had 2 videos blow up with that title. You always want to be wrong. You always want to admit you're wrong.
Always want to be wrong. But
yeah, great title.
I feel like it's one of those things that I don't know if I have put more self-judgment on myself, being like, I'm I'm concerned about how other people will perceive me, if it's a wanting to be taken seriously thing, like whatever it is, I don't really know. But I've kind of started to distance myself from it. And I'm like, this is what I like. This is what I'm reading. I'm having a good time. If you want to hear about it, you can hang out. But if not, like,
well, the lasting people who will come and watch you and talk to you and interact are going to be people who are invested in you, and less about what if you're reading Name of the Wind this month or like that will result in more people watching. But the people who actually want to engage are people who are going to be more, open-minded, I guess is the word I would use. Hey, but by the way, I've also been wrong before. I kind of said Mistborn was the most average slop pile I'd ever read, and then I read Way of Kings and I loved it. And my other thing was One Piece. I always, One Piece has a lot of attention and it's very popular.
Just a bit.
And I started reading it, and I was like, oh no, I've panned this, but now you had to feel. I was like, oh no. This is sick.
I am enjoying myself. What is happening? Yeah.
I loved it. And I've read 500 chapters. I need to get back to it. Now, ironically, and this is probably unique because this is a different medium, but like for me, I realized, I really love this thing. I don't like talking about it. I actually don't. Well, that's not true. I love talking about it. I don't want to have a YouTube channel about it because I was doing those videos getting 50,000, some of them at 100,000 views.
I know, it was nuts.
And it didn't mean an ounce to me because I was like, I'm not having fun talking about this on the internet, so I just don't talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
But I ate crow on that. I mean, I made fun of One Piece and people covering One Piece, and then I realized that, like, for me, that story was like almost I had to like compulsively vomit things because there's so much to it. To this day, One Piece still has some of the best world building I've ever read.
Yeah, and I mean, I still haven't read One Piece. I will at some point, I'm sure.
But it's worth trying. Yeah,
honestly, like I'm not opposed to trying it. It's just that this year was a hard year. Like this year was a really hard year. A lot of stuff happened that we weren't expecting to happen, and it just wasn't good.
You mean like the last month or so, maybe?
I mean, that definitely didn't help, but it started in January. Like my family, between Josh and I, we've had about 5 deaths this year. And it's like, then there's health stuff and there's job stuff. And then there's just average living stuff. And then there was last month. So, it was just one thing after another. And it used to be that for me in the previous year, I was like, well, reading is my safe space and my mental sanctuary, like that I go to escape. And I was finding that the books that I had previously gone to weren't offering me what I needed in that moment. And because they were heavy, like picking up the Way of Kings as I was feeling would not have yielded a positive mental state for me. And, my best friends knew what was going on, and they were Romantasy readers, and they were like, please just read Fourth Wing. Like, please just read it. And I was like, fine, just to like get you off my back, I'll read it. And within like 30 pages, I was like, shit, like this seems fun. And then as the book continued, I was like, this is really fun. Damn it. And I didn't want to admit it, but I was like, this is giving me mentally what I need right now, which is just like a reprieve. I just needed a reprieve, and this is offering me exactly what I needed. And I found that really was what Romantasy offered me this year, was like a break from everything. And people can find that in whatever genre speaks to them, but for me that was my journey this year, so it ended up being really interesting.
I mean, also, and it's almost impossible to avoid, but like being so sure and certain and concrete in things is almost a surefire way of making an ass of yourself later. Like
without question.
Speaking in absolutes is never a good idea. Almost never a good idea.
No.
See, I didn't speak in absolute there. I said almost.
Almost. I got it. Yeah.
And I think that we feel so solidified in views of certain things and biases or whatever, but like there's always the opportunity to find an exception or to be proven completely 100% really wrong, which can happen. So I think that that's good to be open to the idea of reading things. Like, for instance, like I'm going to read like Emily Henry and stuff.
I'm so excited.
Listen, I'm not expecting it to be my favorite of all time. It's in there, Sarah J. Maas. I read the first almost the whole first chapter of Roses, and like I thought, like first I was like, this is nowhere near as bad as everyone makes it out to be.
No, it's not.
But two, and I mean that's only a chapter, so who knows? Maybe it'll get way worse. But
I think it gets better personally.
Yeah, and I know that book one's like not strong, but here's my thing: like I'm not expecting myself to become a romantasy like dude. Like it's probably not going to happen.
I would say it's unlikely,
but I would like to make sure.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole thing. I feel like we have gotten into this whole idea that we are in our lane and that's our lane, and we probably won't like the other stuff. You're allowed to like the other stuff and still be predominantly in.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, when I read Stoner by John Williams, I was convinced, like, I was like, dude, this book's about a professor that dies. I'm so bored. Like, this is going to be terrible. Like, I was dreading it. And, and so lo and behold, I listened to it and, I was like, this is amazing. It's
incredible.
It's like one of the best books I've ever read, you know,
right?
and obviously from there, I evangelized it to everyone I possibly could. And all of a sudden it's like, why are these fancy booktubers talking about this academic professor dying?
I know.
Like, what a weird
trend
thing.
Setting everywhere you go. Trend setting.
Yeah, and you know it's tough. It's tough being an influencer.
That might be the new channel name, the Trend Setting Network.
I do have another channel that I've really been wanting to work on, but I can't disclose the title because someone would steal it. But I'll tell you after
I'm very excited. I'm very curious.
It's very dumb, but it's something that I've been wanting to work on for a while. We'll see. That's
exciting. Well, I am curious to see what your romantasy journey is going to look like in general. I'm just curious. I mean, I am excited in the sense that people in my Discord have told me, they're like, I have not read a romantasy, but I'm going to give your book a try. And I'm like, that is the nicest thing you could possibly say to me. And I appreciate it, even if you hate it. You know, I'm like, I appreciate that you're going to
they're giving time.
Yeah. Like that is literally, I even wrote that in the acknowledgement section. I was like, literally just thank you for giving me your time. I know how precious time is. Thank you. Like that is the best gift you could give me. Yeah. And it's true. Like people willingly reading your book is incredible. I think it's the nicest thing.
Yeah. And it's like, hey, I've done my best. Like I know I've done my best, and you're giving a fair shot, and fair play to you, whatever you come out with. But thanks.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, I think you know. There's sometimes when I hear people like get super mad at an author, which to be fair, like there's a lot of authors that are justifiably someone
you
that
can get mad at them.
Sure, fine. But like there is almost like a mutual agreement. Like you're I think R. Scott Baker said your surrender is writing, not just surrendering your soul, or reading is surrendering your soul in those moments to those words. And I think that is true. And I find a connection in that. I don't really try to deify authors too much. Like obviously I'm a huge George R. R. Martin fan, but I still don't like deify him in any way. But it would be silly of me to say that there isn't some sort of like weird connection
for sure
experiencing a book.
Joanna and I were talking about this after the Cormac McCarthy article came out because my blow came earlier in the year with Neil Gaiman. Like most people know, I had a very strong affinity for Neil Gaiman. I don't know how to correlate that now in separating the artist from the art in my mind. It's very difficult. I'm struggling with it immensely, but it was one of those things that like we didn't used to know who authors were, you know, and at what point did that really change? Like at what point did they become personalities, the people that are tangible and real to us? Because as a kid, you would just kind of read a book, right? And you didn't, if you chose to, you would look at the photo and be like, okay, that's what they look like. And that was the end of it. But now you intimately can know these people. Like you can meet them, you can follow them.
Well, you intimately know what they're willing to show you.
What they're willing to show you and share with you. And I mean, like there are social media pages that have live updates and like follow authors as to like where they are, what they're doing, and all that kind of stuff. Like Sarah J. Maas has that. I'm like, this is an invasion of privacy, first of all. Like it's creepy. Stop doing it. But secondly, it's like, why are we so invested in these people's lives as people? Like what is it that's driving that connection for us with them? And the thing that I was saying to Joanna was that for me, I feel like I'm 0 for 2 because as a kid, the first one was really J.K. Rowling. And then as an adult, it was Neil Gaiman. And it was because these were two people that were willing to put themselves more so in the public limelight, I felt, than others. They were both very active on social media. For a time, J.K. Rowling was, a champion of people on Twitter. And then that died a very quick death. And Neil Gaiman was the same way. And I was like, it's interesting that we've had this kind of shift in dynamic where we have started to deify authors in this way because of the glimpses that they have been willing to share with us and what we gleaned of them. And I don't know when that really clicked in for a lot of people, but it's hard.
Well, and it's not just authors, right? Like it's everything. No, and we know way too much about everyone now, or we think we know. I mean, that's the other thing is like we only know what we think we know. Not every single thing is factual until it's proven or whatever. But I've never in my life, I don't think, had that need to like idolize or people are like, who's your hero? Who's your hero?
Yeah, I never really had that either.
I would have to like
Augustus, but that's about it.
So. Yeah, I would have to like really think about it. Like I would have to really stretch my imagination or just feel like forced to pick someone, right? But like I've never really had that. I don't know why that is, and I don't think that makes me better than anyone else or anything like that. But I do wonder what it is about me that in my experiences in life or the way I'm programmed that I don't have that. But there is a really real thing where people just want to get behind someone. And I think with authors or artists or anyone that has become from something that wasn't something,
sure,
like seeing them right. Like, I mean, like for instance, like the Rowling story, I even hate whenever she's really brought up because it's just like so polarizing, but like, I mean, her story is insanely cool.
It is.
As far as like writing on napkins and blah, 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 blah. Everyone loves those stories. And I think that to me makes a little bit more sense, possibly. T Baggins says it's my nihilism.
Yeah,
probably. It probably is. Maybe that's how I tuck myself into bed at night, is that I'm like, everyone's just as messed up as I am. So like, there's no reason to put them above me. Maybe that's it. But yeah, I don't know. There is.
I think for me, it's not necessarily a heroism thing. It's more that I want to champion things about certain people. Like, I do that for everyone that I know. Like, that's not specific to someone that I would say is in the limelight or like a celebrity status. Like with you, I'm like, Jimmy's the best interviewer I know. Like when people ask me on, what live show on YouTube or like, who do you think is the best interviewer? I'm like, it's Jimmy. And I'm like, I will pick things about people that I think are that are just admirable about them. And it's a quality that I think is something that I would like for myself in many ways. So like with Neil Gaiman, I would say I loved Neil's ability to retell myth. Like that for me is something that I was gravitated towards so much. And I love that. And his brain to me is so interesting, and it's like, it's those things. I think it's aspects of people for me, as opposed to just putting them on this general.
That's cool. Yeah. And we all have our negative traits. Like
definitely.
Like we're a bag of those. We're a bag of negative and positive traits. It's somewhere in between. It depends on where what side of the road you're standing on or something. Like it's all perspective anyways. But yeah, I like that. I think that's, like there are certain traits about people that I'm like, I kind of wish I had that.
Right.
Mitch has a very good statement. He said, I didn't separate McCarthy's personal life when it came to appreciating Suttree, so I can't just ignore when it comes to taking away from it as well. Honest to God, this is probably the perfect statement for me. Yeah. Because actually Suttree is my favorite Cormac McCarthy work. And it is semi-autobiographical. Yeah. And it has one of the most impactful scenes I've ever read. I cried, but also just fascinating in many ways. And I gave Cormac a lot of credit in that book because of who he was from that book. Sure. But now with the context, there's also stuff in the book that was very troubling that I gave him the benefit of the doubt of, and being like, oh, well, he wasn't like that. But it turns out he certainly wasn't like that. He was, yeah. And I agree with Mitch. Like the idea that I can just like, that I can appreciate the personal impact that he has on his own stories and then not take away from it because that makes me like a snowflake or something. I don't really get that. And hey, and God bless you if you can just complete like that's great. I wish I was like that'd be sick, but I'm not.
I can't. I struggle with it deeply. Like it was one of those things that like I look at my shelf now of Neil Gaiman books and I'm like, what do I do with you?
Well, it's not that I like, for instance, I might read McCarthy again. I would really like to finish his last 3 books, to be honest. Though people are starting to pull out some quotes of his last book, and it's troubling because it's clear that he wrote her into some of the books, which is disgusting. But like, it's not that I can't enjoy parts of his books anymore or anything, but like, I also am not going to like live in La La Land and pretend it didn't. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm not really for telling people like, you can't read that. Like I'm never for that. But also you can't tell me that I can't consider those things when I read his works, especially because he wrote that woman into his books. So what am I supposed to do with that? I have to consider, it has to be weighed.
Jared's video about it I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, very measured.
Very Jared.
And what he said, he got a lot of comments, and he was actually shocked that he was thinking people would be like, you can't read him, ever again. But in fact, it was actually the opposite. A lot of people saying that like this isn't a big deal. Ha ha ha! It's so silly that Cormac did this, or along the lines of like you're clutching pearls. It's really not that big of a deal that he took this very vulnerable 16, which we think she's actually 14 now, based on today. Forged a birth certificate, went across to Mexico so he could do whatever with her. And, I think Jared was a little shocked, and I was shocked when I read his comments of how many people apparently are really cool with that. Like they really like that. And that's the unfortunate reality that I'm going off. I think it's an unfortunate reality that, you can look around there and there's just a lot of dudes that think that that's really sick and really cool. Yeah. And that is troubling to me. Very troubling.
It is. Not surprising, unfortunately. Not surprising. But I do think if you haven't watched Jared's video, I think takes a very academic approach. And that I thought was an interesting take for the whole thing in regards of how to read it going forward. But it poses a whole lot of questions, right? It poses a whole lot of questions, especially he's dead, so like good, but it's one of those things where I'm like, Neil Gaiman's not, so it's a little bit more complicated. Like I feel like there's all these mitigating factors.
Yeah, I actually, so I saw someone saying that like actually the answer gets a lot simpler whenever a person. So for instance, Zimmer Bradley. So apparently, if you buy her books, that money actually goes to a victims charity. So that's actually great, but whenever they're alive, maybe it makes it a little bit more complicated. And to me, because the point is that you're monetarily supporting them.
Yeah.
And I actually had someone who was like, I don't believe that's true. So like, I don't mind. And I'm like,
where do you think their money goes?
I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm not telling you what to do, but I like. That's reality. Like I honestly, it like jarred me. I was just like, wait, what? But there are people all around us every day that live in a totally different reality. And I think also it's like an evolutionary aspect of our brains to lie to ourselves and to delude ourselves. So I'm sure I do it all the time too. So who am I to judge?
I've done a lot of that this year. A lot of it.
Just gaslighting yourself. Yeah.
Everything's fine has been like on loop in my head as the world has been on fire around me. It's been great.
It's been a crazy year.
It has been a crazy year. I'm curious to see what 2025 will yield, other than publishing one book, maybe publishing 2.
Who knows? You should take a year break though, because Philip did all 3 of his in a year, and I'm like, Philip, what are you doing?
What are you doing? I was thinking initially, trying to aim for every 6 months. That was my initial goal, but we'll see. I'm not rushing it. Okay. It's gonna take its time. But
take its time.
Yeah.
There is no rush. Enjoy it.
There isn't.
Well, just do yourself a favor. Do not drop a book anytime Colleen Hoover or Sarah J. Maas drop a book, and you'll be fine.
No. And that's what I'm hoping, because she hasn't made any announcements for
you just
for June 2025.
check those release date schedules. Don't release anywhere near those. And
I did actually, before I picked my date, I went through all of the books that were coming out around that time period. And I was like, there's nothing on this day. I think I'm in the clear. So hopefully, but I just know like January 5th, she's going to be like, yeah, January or June. That's when the book's
surprise release.
Right? Which I mean, like, I would also simultaneously be super psyched about. So,
reader.
I mean, I can't be too upset about it. But I mean, yeah, 2025 is going to be a different year.
Yes.
That's what I'm telling myself. A very different year.
There's always the opportunity.
Exactly. So what is something that you are looking forward to for 2025?
Just reading a godforsaken amount of David Mitchell and Kazuo Ishiguro. Like that's honestly all I really want right now. The other thing that I would say is that I am very excited to try Mage's Blood by somebody named somebody. I can't remember his name, but I read the first chapter or prologue or whatever, and I thought that it was just so good and well written. And it's an epic fantasy, and I love the premise of it. So I would say Mage's Blood, I'm very excited for. I'm also very excited for David Farland's Rune Lord series. I'm reading the first arc, and I'm not going to read the second arc. So I'd say those two things I'm very excited to hopefully get in 2025. I'm making zero commitments, but like that, those are things I'm excited about. And then I'm also, like I said, I just really want to sit down and just read some David Mitchell. Like I just want to have fun. So.
Are we getting our next Game of Thrones book in 2025?
No, but I did hear some interesting things apparently from our good friend Kyle from I don't know if I'm supposed to share this Dragonsteel, and speaking to Sean Speakman, who had made a comment on a Facebook post about like people saying wins would never happen, and him being like, you guys really don't realize how close this thing is. And essentially he had told Kyle that George has enough pages. He is at the page count that is a limit of binding. So that maybe part of this issue is trying to figure out whether they should split or he gets the ending that he really wants.
Yeah.
My hot take is I've been saying for all along, he should split the books up and he should get rid of this idea of a number in his head. Like I know George likes the number 7. He's really big on it.
I know, but it's not necessary.
It's not necessary. And he actually even had a recollection or a reflection in his blog recently this year where he said that, hell, maybe I should have made more books. Like maybe I should have made smaller books, because he was talking about Zelazny, I think, in the Chronicles of Amber, how short they are. And he was just like, well, maybe I should have done that. Who the hell knows? It's too late now. So I'm not going to say it's coming on 2025, because my date for 6 years was November 2024. I was wrong. It's okay. It sucks, but it's okay.
Yeah.
But I do think like the people who are like, oh, he hasn't written a word, or it's been 2 pages, and I don't believe that.
Lot, I think
Sean Speakman knows his stuff, and also George has given us updates, and we can run the numbers on it. I mean, he's written he's written a lot. So I think that 2025 is unlikely. We'll see. I mean, we'll get it in some way, shape, or form. Like if he were to pass or something, or he decided he retired, we will get whatever he has written, edited up.
Yeah,
they've done this for many authors. Kafka or what's that book I read? By the Australian author that died, and they found her books and they edited them. Oh, Ben's gonna kill me. It was Ben's Patreon pick. Someone might remember, but the point is that this has happened to many people. So,
and then David Mitchell will finish the series. What a series that!
Ironically, I think he would do a great job at it.
I think he would do a great job with certain aspects of it, but
the voices would be
exactly. I think the voices would be spot on. But honestly, this is one of those things that, like, I know a lot of people like to say Abercrombie is the only real option to finish.
No, see, people are so wrong about all this. Well, Abercrombie's never going to do it, so might as well get that out.
He's not. But I don't think there's anybody, honestly. I just don't. I think he's unmatched in so many ways.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I think he's the GOAT of fantasy. But also, if someone were to finish it, which as of right now, he has said that would not happen, but he has started changing his tune about it a little bit in relation to other people's works. It will not be Daniel Abraham. It will not be Ty Franck. It will not be
Sanderson.
Robin Hobb. It certainly won't be Sanderson.
Yeah.
It will be someone that you have never heard of, and it will be one of his writing assistants. Tad Williams would be a great pick, but
I think Tad Williams would actually be a very good choice. Yeah.
It would be a good choice. It won't happen. Tad is at he's done.
He's at capacity.
Yeah, he's past it. He has his own things to worry about. But it will be someone you have probably never heard of.
And that's okay.
Most likely a female, because a lot of his assistants are female, and that'll be what happened. I mean, Daniel Abraham and Ty Franck were his assistants at one point.
Yeah.
Assistants.
Yeah.
And now they've moved on and they have their own properties and they're doing really great. But it will not be AI, Matt. I almost assuredly, I assure you it will not be, because George is suing AI, Open AI, because someone did a Winds of Winter like AI, like he hates it. He very much hates it. So, so yeah, I we can only go off what the man has said, and as we know right now, he said no one would finish it, but that actually doesn't go up to him, because I promise you, Tolkien would never have had movies made. So whoever gets the estate, like whoever wins the estate, is what matters at the end of the day, and money talks. You know, that's the world we live in. So it'll most likely be an assistant that you've never ever heard of. Yeah,
that's okay. Honestly,
it'd be great. Yeah,
prefer that. Really, I would.
And if it's Ilio and Linda, I'll be very upset. Oh my god, please no.
Never. Never.
Ilio and Linda are.
No, speaking of Tad Williams, though, I am so jealous of those covers. I wanted them so badly from Broken Binding.
Yeah, I would say the Broken Binding one, not the new release ones. No, unfortunately,
the Broken Binding ones, they are gorgeous.
That dude is so underappreciated, and I finished Navigator's Children, and like I'll just tell you now, like I don't think Wind and Truth will top it, because it's just such a banger. But yeah, I love Tad Williams, man. What a great mind, creative, very creative.
I need to get back to reading him at some point. I started and then I got distracted. It does happen, but it was one of the few times that I got distracted from a book that I was genuinely enjoying. It was just life. So I do need to get back to him, but yeah, Dragon Bone Chair, I will get back to it eventually.
Yeah, he has a great command of all the aspects of storytelling, I think.
Yeah, I really did see the similarities between Martin and him in the bit that I read.
Yeah, people who say it's a clone are reaching and just
no, it's not. There's similarities for sure, but I mean, that's what writing is. I feel like you take what you love and you make it your own. That's, unless you were one of the first people to ever put pen to paper or stone, whatever it was that they were using, like it's just, that's how it works.
The Epic of Gilgamesh might be up there. R. Scott Baker would argue that everything is what has come before. So
it is, and will come again, to quote Battlestar Galactica.
That is also in R. Scott Baker's books as well. So
there you go. Well, we have been going for 2.5 hours, Jimmy.
I have to pee so bad.
So why don't you tell the people where they can find you?
By the way, Rogue, I will be finishing Shadow March. I'll probably read Bobby Dollar first, and then I'll get back to Shadow March. I read book 1, loved it, but I didn't want to read it and Oathsnard like close together because they're both epic fantasies. But you can find me over at the Fantasy Nuttwork over on my channel here on YouTube. I'm also on the Bend the Knee podcast and the Lost in Roshar podcast. And who knows what else I'll be working on in the coming year. But it was great talking to you, Laura. It was a lot of fun. I'm glad I'm the first repeat guest. I feel like I am repetitive, so it kind of fits the theme of me.
Not at all.
But I am I'm very happy and humbled that you invited me back on. So thank you.
Anytime. I'm always happy to chat with you. But thank you all for joining us for our we really covered all the topics this evening. This was quite a journey. But if you are watching on replay, let us know what your favorite topic of the Gambit was, because I am genuinely curious. But thank you all for spending your Saturday night with us. If you'd like to help support the channel, you can always do all the fun things, liking it, subscribing. It's Patreon too, if that's your thing. If not, that's fine. It's also whatever. It's all good. So yeah. It's been good. It's been fun. It's been 2.5 hours. Thank you for spending your Saturday with us. Honestly, guys, great chat. And we will see you next time.